Chapter 2580. An unimaginable opportunity. The first test of a trial challenger was about mastering source strength. Only by successfully mastering at least one source strength of law could one be called a true trial challenger. From then on, the journey of the trial could be considered to have begun. Yi Xian had the status of a trial taker, but he didn't have the strength to back it up. There was only one realm above the paramount divine emperor, and it was also the only one that existed. That was the God Ruler. The God Ruler should have been a realm, but it had long since become synonymous with a person. When the God Ruler was mentioned, people only thought of the God Ruler himself, not the other realms. Among the inexplicable laws, there was a rule that stated that there could only ever be one God Ruler in each realm. The God Ruler controlled everything in his realm. If he wanted to, he could destroy the realm at any time. No one knew just how powerful the ruler was. Were there really only 12 protectors? Why were there so many keepers of order, but only 12 guardians? The fundamental reason was because of their battles with the God Ruler. Yi Xian had heard many rumors about the God Ruler from Dai Lian. Of course, he couldn't be 100% sure, but Yi Xian felt that it was very likely. It was said that the Guardians had been an incomparably powerful force, but because they'd fought the God Ruler time and time again, they'd fallen to their current state. The core of the Guardians' philosophy was to protect the God realm. They couldn't allow the God Ruler to succeed in his plan to destroy the God realm. After returning from Dai Lian Xian, Yi Xian looked at the 999 levels of the Origin Secret Realm. He didn't seem to feel the slightest fear no matter how he looked at it. This was just a trial ground for the Guardians, a place for trial takers like him to train. Who cared if he was the city lord? He was nothing more than a foil. In that case, why should he be so restrained? Why should he think twice before doing anything? Staying in the Yi Manor was also to prove his talent and gain the city lord's approval. Yi Xian was Yi Xian. What did he need to prove to anyone? This time, Yi Xian did not return to the Yi residence. Instead, he walked out. Sure enough, as soon as Yi Xian walked out of the city, he immediately felt a few gazes on him. It seemed that these people who were monitoring Yi Xian were becoming bolder and bolder. They actually dared to monitor him at such a close distance? Was it really impossible for him to find out? Or did he really think that he was that easy to bully? Yi Xian smirked. Didn't you want to spy on me? Then, I'll let you have a taste of my power. With a wave of his hand, a ray of light entered the ground beneath Yi Xian's feet. In an instant, a strange force spread out with Yi Xian as the center. Didn't you want to spy on me? In that case, I'll let you suffer a little first. Yi Xian thought in his heart. At the same time, his figure moved and he immediately charged forward. Sure enough, when they saw Yi Xian suddenly accelerate, the people who were tailing Yi Xian also sped up and chased after him. However, when they arrived at that area, the ground suddenly exploded as if it was boiling. The energy that Yi Xian had just injected was not a restriction or an array. It was just a few talismans. The function of the talismans was to explode. When these people entered the area, Yi Xian did not hesitate to detonate the talismans. Perhaps it was true that detonating the talismans now would not have much of an effect. After all, the power of the talismans alone would not be able to do anything to these people. However, Yi Xian did not intend to kill them. The power of the talisman's explosion was just to buy some time for Yi Xian. The sudden attack naturally caused these people to be slightly stunned. It was inevitable that they would be delayed for a while. However, this small amount of time was enough for Yi Xian to shake off their pursuit. Originally, Yi Xian had wanted to search for Luo Luo and the others. However, when he arrived at their residence, he did not find them. Helpless, Yi Xian could only use a secret voice transmission technique to ask. However, he learned that Luo Luo and the other two women had discovered a mysterious place and were preparing to enter to explore it. Yi Xian's heart suddenly tightened. He immediately stopped the three women and rushed over. Yi Xian had already suspected that there was a power writing his script. His every action in the Origin Mystic Realm was being watched by a pair of eyes. However, Yi Xian seemed to be even more certain of this feeling now. The three women did not go out often. Even if they did, they would not wander too far away. There were basically no Origin beasts in this area. Therefore, the sudden appearance of this mysterious place was suspicious. Yi Xian didn't dare to stop in the slightest as he quickly converged with the three girls. After all, Yi Xian didn't know what that pair of eyes wanted him to do or what it wanted to do to the people around him. In just a moment, Yi Xian had already arrived at the three women's location. However, Yi Xian would never have imagined that the three women had indeed not left. However, they had already discovered the secret of that mysterious place. Treasure chests. Rows and rows of treasure chests. There were probably more than 10,000 of them. There were so many boxes. Who put them here? Why had no one discovered them after so long? Master, a few days ago, we coincidentally sensed a mysterious aura emanating from underground, so we've been paying attention to this place. A few days later, a rumbling sound came from here, and when we arrived here, this place was constantly emitting brilliant lights. That's right, young master. We followed your instructions and did not move recklessly. However, as the lights dissipated, these chests appeared. We do not know what these chests are or what they are used for. Luo and Fian spoke first. Yi Xian nodded. However, his gaze was fixed on the chests. System, detect these chests. I want to see what is inside. Following Yi Xian's command, the system's notification sounded. One had to know that during the system's weakened period, detection would consume a lot of energy. However, Yi Xian had no choice but to play it safe. Ding. System notification. The target is made of special materials. You cannot see through the items inside. Cannot see through them? Yi Xian frowned slightly. Then, with a wave of his hand, the divine wood swordsman appeared. Go and see what is inside. The Godslayer was already suspended in mid-air. Yi Xian was also holding the heavenly bow in his hand. If there was something bad in those chests, Yi Xian would have no choice but to destroy them. The divine wood swordsman quickly arrived beside those chests. Then, they directly opened one of the chests. Rays of light were emitted in an instant. However, Luo exclaimed, "It's actually an origin stone." Chapter 2581. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studio System Recovery also rewards source stones? What were those? Luo, do you know about these things? Yi Xian couldn't help but ask. Yes, young master. Although these source stones don't have the same effects as origin divine crystals, they are still many times better than spirit stones. When I was controlled by the Order Enforcers, they provided me with these source stones continuously. That's how I was able to increase my cultivation base so quickly. Was this a gift from the heavens? Yi Xian frowned. No matter how he looked at it, this situation was very strange. Divine wood sword servants, open a few more boxes to take a look. Yi Xian continued to give orders. Upon receiving Yi Xian's order, the divine wood sword servants opened 6 boxes in succession. All of them were filled to the brim with source stones. However, just as the divine wood sword servants were about to open the 7th box, a voice suddenly rang out. Don't look at them. These are all source stones and some other cultivation resources. Since you are a trial disciple of my protector and have not received any resources for such a long time, then these resources will be your compensation. Remember, the trial has already begun. Quickly increase your cultivation base. Once you reach the Supreme Divine Lord grade, you will leave the secondary realm. This voice seemed to come from all directions, yet it also seemed to only appear in Yi Xian's ears. In an instant, Yi Xian actually felt his hair stand on end. What kind of cultivation base did the person who spoke have? It was just a sentence, yet it was able to make Yi Xian feel such immense pressure. This voice appeared quickly and disappeared just as quickly, as if it had never appeared. However, at least Yi Xian now knew why these things had appeared here. They were actually for him. At this moment, Yi Xian didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He never would have thought that so many origin stones would cause him to be on tenterhooks, but they were all things that were given to him. Yi Xian was slightly taken aback. With a wave of his hand, he collected half of the boxes. As for the remaining half, they were naturally left for Luo and the others. Since these things are all for me, then there's no need for us to be polite. Each of you can take some as cultivation resources and strive to break through to the highest Divine Lord realm as soon as possible. The 3 women nodded. Although Luo was already a Supreme Divine Lord, this was still a gift from Yi Xian, so he would naturally accept it. System. Can these resources help you recover? Ding. System notification. You only need 1/3 of it to recover. Alright, since that's the case, You should absorb the energy and recover quickly. Yi Xian told the system. These source stones were indeed hard to come by. However, to Yi Xian, their biggest use was to make it easier for him to repair the system. After all, a large part of Yi Xian's power came from the system. If the system could not be restored, then Yi Xian would not be able to unleash his full power. At this moment, Yi Xian would naturally let the system absorb the energy from these source stones so that it could quickly recover. Following Yi Xian's command, the source stones turned into energy and were absorbed by the system. However, this process was only known to Yi Xian. Others would not be able to see the changes in Yi Xian's universe ring. Although there weren't as many guardians as there were order enforcers, there were still benefits to having fewer people. For example, the origin stones that Yi Xian had received were probably enough for over 100 order enforcers or even more to use. As Yi Xian walked back, he waited for the system notification. Only when the system was fully restored would Yi Xian's power be able to increase for a long time. Finally, the system notification came. This time, it brought Yi Xian a pleasant surprise. Ding! System notification. System energy is sufficient. Repair complete. Ding! System notification. System energy is sufficient. Upgrade conditions met. System upgrade automatically activated. Ding! System upgrade in progress. This was a blessing in disguise. Yi Xian was overjoyed. He had never expected that the system would not only be restored but also upgraded. The benefits of the system upgrade went without saying. Yi Xian was filled with anticipation. He didn't know what kind of unexpected benefits the system upgrade would bring him this time. Therefore, Yi Xian didn't even devour the source stones. This was because Yi Xian wanted to wait until the system upgrade was complete before he could see how to use the source stones. Just as Yi Xian was filled with anticipation, the system notification finally sounded. Ding! System notification. System upgrade complete. Ding! System notification. Congratulations to the host for completing the unique hidden mission. The system is broken and rebuilt. You have obtained the unique gift pack. Ding! System notification. System upgrade complete. System store updated. System mission rewards more detailed. System database updated. A series of notifications rang out continuously. It was the long-awaited system notification. During this period of time when the system was weak, only Yi Xian himself knew how difficult it was to endure. Fortunately, the system had finally recovered. That meant that Yi Xian could once again activate the berserk mode to increase his strength. The system notifications continued for a long time, but they were mostly about the details of the upgrade. As for the reward, there was only one, and that was the unique hidden mission, broken and rebuilt. The unique super reward, the unique gift pack. Just by hearing this name, Yi Xian knew that he would definitely receive a generous reward this time. System, open the unique gift pack. Ding! System notification. The host has successfully opened the unique gift pack. Congratulations to the host for obtaining 3 limitless flip gift packs. 1 realm upgrade lucky draw, 1 limitless equipment level lucky draw, 1 sword attendant gift pack. Limitless flip gift pack? Yi Xian was slightly stunned. What kind of gift pack was this? Even if Yi Xian hadn't received other gift packs before, at least he knew what they were used for based on their names. However, this limitless flip gift pack was something that Yi Xian couldn't understand. System, what is the use of this limitless flip gift pack? How do I use it? Ding! System notification. Unlimited gift packs. Every time the host opens one, as long as the host receives a reward, the host can continue to open them until there is no more gift left. Please note that the number of gift packs can be expanded without limit. However, the more the host receives, the lower the chance of winning. Yi Xian was slightly taken aback. He still didn't quite understand, but since there were 3 limitless flip gift packs, he might as well open one and take a look. System, open an infinite reversal gift pack first. As Yi Xian's name was mentioned, an exquisite gift bag appeared in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian casually tapped the gift bag and it immediately opened. Chapter 2582. Time of drawing the reverse scale armor was an armor forged from the reverse scales of a divine dragon. Its defensive power was incomparably strong. It did not seem to be of much use. Although it was made from the mystical dragon's reverse scale, It only had defensive capabilities. It was completely useless to Yi Xian. Yi Xian casually tossed it into his Jianghu ring and looked at the other two twice-flipped gift bags. Ding! Host, please make your choice. This time, you can only choose one out of the two packages. Out of the two packages, only one has a reward. Yi Xian nodded his head, then casually opened another gift bag. Ding! Congratulations to the host. You have obtained 1 Divine Pill of Origin and 3 second flip gift packs. The Divine Origin Pill could help the host comprehend the origin energy faster. This thing was not bad. After all, Yi Xian really needed to understand the power of the origin. Although most people only started to comprehend the power of the origin of laws after they became supreme Sir Gods, it was also because of this that if Yi Xian had comprehended the power of the origin of laws at the Godly Emperor realm, the effect would definitely be much better. Moreover, the last time he comprehended the Primal Chaos Seal, Yi Xian was only a step away from grasping the origin of laws. With this Divine Origin Pill, it would naturally be very useful. So this time, it was a choice of one of the three? Sure enough, just as Yi Xian was thinking about this, the system notification sounded. Ding! Host, please make your choice. This time, you have to choose one out of 3. Out of the 3 packages, only one package has a reward. 1 out of 3? 1/3 chance? However, the probability was still very high. Yi Xian looked at them for a long time, but the 3 gift bags were exactly the same. There was no difference at all. As such, Yi Xian could only choose based on luck. System, I choose the middle one. Ding! System notification. The host has chosen the correct gift package. The lucky draw is over. Not selected. Yi Xian was slightly taken aback. System, give me another gift pack. It could be said that flipping the gift pack was quite interesting. Of course, other than the fact that it was interesting, the most important thing was that the things he could open were really unknown. Compared to the other gift packs, which could only be used once, the flip gift pack could be used multiple times as long as one was lucky. After all, theoretically speaking, the flip gift pack could be used indefinitely. After all, he would definitely have a gift bag with a reward every time. As long as he could obtain the reward, he could continue to receive gift bags. Therefore, in theory, the flip gift pack could be obtained without limit. Moreover, from the looks of the rewards, it seemed that the rewards in the flip gift pack would not be small. Ding! Congratulations to host for obtaining Hailstone Divine Needle. Congratulations to host for obtaining 2 flip gift packs. Very quickly, the 3 gift bags were opened by Yi Xian. However, although the rewards were not bad, there was nothing suitable for Yi Xian. It wasn't that the flip gift pack was bad, but Yi Xian's luck wasn't that good this time. This was because Yi Xian didn't choose the last 2 gift bags on his second try. Therefore, he could only blame his bad luck. However, Yi Xian wasn't depressed. After all, the real highlight was just beginning. The flip gift pack was just an appetizer. Realm. A magic treasure with no upper limit. A random sword servant. These were the 3 items that Yi Xian valued the most. System, open the realm gift pack. This was a good item that could directly increase Yi Xian's realm. How could Yi Xian not be excited? Ding! System notification. Rewards are being drawn. Congratulations to host for obtaining 3 special level-up elixirs. Ding! System notification. The level-up elixir can directly increase the host's realm by 1. It can be used under any circumstances. Ding! System notification. The level-up elixir can only increase the host's realm to the highest level, the God Emperor realm. Yi Xian was slightly taken aback, but he quickly understood the benefits of the elixir. It was specially used for breaking through realms. In order to level up from the God Emperor realm to the Supreme God realm, one needed to have a preliminary understanding of an origin source law. However, if Yi Xian didn't have a preliminary understanding of an origin source law, then the level-up elixir could forcibly increase Yi Xian's realm and allow him to gain a random comprehension of an origin source law. By the same logic, when a Supreme God Emperor realm broke through to the Supreme God King realm, Yi Xian could also use the level-up elixir to break through the barrier. It could be said that these 3 level-up elixirs were more useful than directly increasing Yi Xian's realm by 3 levels. Yi Xian carefully put the 3 elixirs into his Qian ring. Now wasn't the time to use them. Useful things should be saved for when they were needed. System, Open the random sword servant gift bag. It was indeed time for Xianxia's sword servant to change. Ding. System notification. Congratulations to host for obtaining the Chaos Sword Servant. The Chaos Sword Servant was a special sword servant formed by the Chaos Law. This sword servant was immune to all law power attacks. At the same time, it had extremely strong physical attacks. Immune to all law powers? That was right. The Chaos Law itself was used to repair the chaotic laws. It was normal for this sword servant formed by the Chaos Law to be immune to all law power attacks. However, Xian was stunned. This was because he couldn't see the Chaos Sword Servant at all. Even when he used his divine consciousness to sense it, he couldn't sense where the Chaos Sword Servant was. This Chaos Sword Servant had the unique talent of absolute concealment. In other words, it was almost impossible for him to be discovered. It was needless to say that such a sword servant would be very useful. There was still one last gift pack, and that was the Limitless Equipment gift pack. The unlimited equipment bag meant that there was no limit to the quality of the items. Even if Xian got an ultimate divine weapon, it wasn't impossible. However, at this moment, Xian was a little hesitant. After all, there was only one chance. It would be a lie to say that Xian wasn't nervous. Xian calmed himself down and looked at the bag in front of him. In the end, he chose to open it. System, open the unlimited equipment bag. Xian silently waited for the result. It could be said that at this moment, Xian was extremely excited and nervous. Ding! System notification. Congratulations to host for obtaining the Boundless. What was that? Xian was stunned. What was the Boundless? This was a magic weapon? When Xian held the Boundless in his hand, he realized that it was just a ball of light. Xian admitted that this light was very mysterious. However, what was the use of this light? System, quick, explain to me what the use of this Boundless is. Ding! System notification. The Boundless is a singularity. With the Boundless, there are infinite possibilities. The host can integrate the Boundless into the devouring space. This way, the devouring space can truly become a complete world, no different from the outside world. Chapter 2583. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios blocking the way was courting death. Legend had it that when the world was first born, it was just a small singularity. As the singularity expanded, the chaotic laws inside gave birth to the 4 ultimate divine artifacts. The 4 ultimate divine artifacts continued to perfect the chaos and expand. Thus, the first God Ruler was born. The first God Ruler was extremely powerful and created countless strong people. These strong people worked hard and finally created the God Realm and countless secret realms today. Could it be that Xian was holding such an existence in his hands now? Xian was holding a world in his hands now. Xian was extremely shocked, but he also knew that although this thing sounded very powerful, it was not very useful to him. After all, it would take hundreds of millions of years for the Realmless to grow. Fortunately, at least the Realmless could be used to perfect the devouring space. The devouring space had always been incomplete, especially the power of the laws, which was even more lacking. Now that the Realmless had appeared, it could grow into a complete world. Xian waved his hand, and the Realmless entered the devouring space. And this time, the lucky draw finally came to an end. Xian did not delay and walked towards the first level of the city. This time, he wanted to completely resolve all the grievances in the first level. It was time for the Azure Dragon Gang to disappear. Since they dared to assassinate Xian several times, then Xian could also destroy them. Because the next time he left, Xian would go to the main realm and begin his true trial as a guardian. However, before Xian returned to the city, he first met the Azure Dragon Gang. It turned out that the Azure Dragon Gang leader had been very uneasy when he heard that Xian was going to die Xian. Die Xian was a taboo existence. He was worried that Xian would know the people there. But after thinking about it, he felt that it was impossible. Xian was only a celestial the Arch after all. How could he know the people of Die Xian? However, the leader of the Azure Dragon Gang was still afraid. If Xian really knew someone from Disc Love Pavilion, then he would be the one to die. Therefore, the leader of the Azure Dragon Gang brought his men to look for Xian, hoping to kill him in one fell swoop. Unfortunately, Xian was extremely fast. How could he possibly find him? Unable to find him, the leader of the Azure Dragon Gang had no choice but to leave behind enough men. At the same time, he issued a kill order to Xianxia. As long as Xianxia was found, he would be killed without question. Therefore, when Xianxia had just reached the edge of the city, he was already blocked by people. Yes, this is that Xianxia? There shouldn't be any mistake. Both the appearance and the realm match. Then what are we waiting for? Send out the signal and gather everyone to kill him. The gang leader has already given the order that we'd rather kill 1,000 innocent people than let Xianxia go. All right, let's do it. As soon as the order was given, the few members of the Azure Dragon Gang, who were originally wandering around, attacked Xianxia without distinguishing between right and wrong. Ding! Warning! Warning! The host is under attack. Boom! With a loud bang, the defenseless Xianxia was directly sent flying. Because this attack did not threaten Xianxia's life, the system did not activate its automatic defense. As for Xianxia himself, he had never thought that he would be ambushed here, so naturally, he was not prepared in the slightest. That was why these people's sneak attack had succeeded. With a loud bang, Xianxia directly crashed into a large mountain. It could be said that this attack had left Xianxia a little dazed. Damn it, who dares to sneak an attack on me? Do you have a death wish? Xianxia was furious. If it were anyone else, they would be furious if they were attacked for no reason. Unfortunately, these people from the Azure Dragon Gang did not take Xianxia seriously at all. Even when they heard Xianxia's words, they ignored Xianxia and launched a new round of attacks. More than a dozen members of the Azure Dragon Gang rushed towards Xianxia from all directions. Damn it, since you want to die, I'll grant you your wish. Xianxia also lost his temper. He had been walking his own path, but these people just had to sneak an attack on him. They did not even say a word. Did they really think that Xianxia was a pushover? Wei Zhantian, kill them for me. At Xianxia's command, the Godslayer immediately flew out. The two Godslayer swords arrived in front of those people in an instant. A sword pierced through the heart. Before one of the Azure Dragon Gang members could understand what had happened, he was shocked to find that his divine spark had been shattered. These were just ordinary members of the Azure Dragon Gang, so they were not very strong. Most of them were only inferior celestial emperors. If Xianxia wanted to kill them, it would be a piece of cake. The Godslayer continued to move. Everywhere it went, it left a trail of blood. In the blink of an eye, all the members of the Azure Dragon Gang were killed. However, this was only the beginning of their deaths. Just as Xianxia finished off these people, more people gathered in the distance. Among these people, there were members of the Azure Dragon Gang, as well as affiliated forces of the Azure Dragon Gang. Of course, there were also people who rushed over for the high reward of killing Xianxia. In an instant, thousands of people appeared in the sky and on the ground. Haha, it really is Xianxia. As long as we kill him, the Azure Dragon Gang will reward us handsomely. Don't fight with me. This Xianxia, I want to kill him with my own hands. Charge! Kill Xianxia and earn the reward money. The first to rush over were not the members of the Azure Dragon Gang, but these people who had gone crazy for the Origin Divine Crystal. Hundreds of people didn't care about so much as they charged towards Xianxia. Xianxia frowned. Hearing these people's roars, Xianxia knew where they came from. Since you want to die, fine. I'll fulfill your wish. Suddenly, Xianxia roared. The Godslayer immediately burst into a ball of light. In an instant, it divided into thousands of swords and fell down like raindrops. Boom, boom, boom. Blood splattered everywhere, and broken limbs were everywhere. One move, just one move, and Xianxia killed hundreds of people. Although these hundreds of people were not very strong, they were still hundreds of fresh lives. In an instant, there was no sound from the Azure Dragon Gang's camp. Everyone looked at the corpses, which were still bleeding, in shock. They felt their scalps go numb. Kill! Damn it, kill that guy! Suddenly, someone shouted. Immediately, more people rushed toward Xianxia. Xianxia looked at those people silently and raised his hand indifferently. I'm not a murderous person, but since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. Chapter 2584. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The terrifying mantra of the six paths. Following Xianxia's words, many of the people who had been charging at Xianxia suddenly fell to the ground. When the people next to him checked, they realized that his divine spark had already shattered. Die! 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 Every time Yi Xian pointed in a direction, a large number of people would die. Most importantly, no one knew what kind of attack had caused these people to fall. The people who had been charging forward excitedly a moment ago all stopped in their tracks. They were scared. They were scared from the bottom of their hearts. They didn't know what had happened. Yi Xian hadn't done anything. All he had done was raise his hand, and so many people had died. A sense of panic and helplessness spread in the hearts of the people. What kind of existence were they facing? Why didn't he need to do anything? He only needed to point his finger, and the people there would die. Retreat! When the first person retreated, even more people retreated in panic. This time, hundreds of people had charged forward, but more than half of them had remained in the path of the charge. Most importantly, no one knew how they had died. Apart from the fact that their divine spark had shattered, no one could see anything strange. What kind of power could be so terrifying? What kind of mystique could be so strange? Yi Xian stopped what he was doing. Using the mantra of the six paths so many times had taken a toll on Yi Xian. However, Yi Xian felt that it was worth it. These people had obviously been bewitched by the Azure Dragon Gang. Yi Xian really didn't want to kill them, but if he didn't make them feel fear, they wouldn't know what fear was. Only by making them feel fear would they stop. Even if he had to kill, Yi Xian hoped that the people he killed were all from the Azure Dragon Gang. Ding! System notification. Congratulations to the host. You have completed the mantra of the six paths. Ding! System notification. The mantra of the six paths has been successfully upgraded. Ding! System notification. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the six paths of truth. The six paths of truth contain the death character formula, injury character formula, extermination character formula, Tao character formula, destruction character formula, and seal character formula. The three words death, injury, and destroy had the same effect as before. The only thing that had changed was the three words destroy and seal. But at this moment, Yi Xian couldn't be bothered to check the effects of these three words because Yi Xian wanted to prove it with actual combat. At this moment, seeing that these wandering people had been defeated by Yi Xian twice, the Azure Dragon Gang finally made their move. At this moment, one of the Azure Dragon Gang's elders was leading over 100 Azure Dragon Gang members to attack Yi Xian. Saber light and sword shadows filled the air. In an instant, the sky was filled with countless attacks. These attacks were incomparably fast. At the same time, they were also extremely ferocious. It was as if he wanted to completely suppress Yi Xian in one move. Yi Xian looked up at the countless attacks in front of him and said indifferently, "Mantra of the six paths, destroy." When he said this, Yi Xian actually spat out a mouthful of blood. It turned out that the pressure of using the six paths of truth was too great. Even if Yi Xian could use it, he would have to pay a huge price. At this moment, this mouthful of blood was the best proof. However, how powerful was the destruction character formula? Following Yi Xian's voice, the mysterious power had already been activated. At the beginning, it seemed like nothing had happened. The attacks continued to rush towards Yi Xian, and the Azure Dragon Gang members didn't seem to be affected in the slightest. But in the blink of an eye, everything changed. Disappeared. Everything had disappeared. It was silent, as if this was how it was supposed to be. The countless attacks all disappeared. As for the people from the Azure Dragon Gang, they also disappeared. However, there were some attentive people who discovered that the color of that area had changed. It was a faint red. Blood red. That area had been completely destroyed by Yi Xian's words. Everything had been decomposed into its most primitive state. Boom. Suddenly, an incomparably loud explosion rang out. Along with this loud sound, a wave of air suddenly exploded. It turned out that it wasn't that there was no sound, but that the attack had been too powerful. Therefore, the sound of the attack had been suppressed and had only burst out at this moment. The powerful wave of air made many people feel as if they couldn't stand properly. However, the most important thing was the smell of blood in the air. There were hundreds of people. Those hundreds of Azure Dragon Gang members had all been turned into a bloody mist. What kind of power was this? Why was it so strange and powerful? Some of the more timid people were so frightened that they fell to the ground, their faces extremely pale. At this moment, Even Yi Xian was rather shocked. He hadn't expected that the upgraded mantra of the six paths would be so powerful. It had only been a word, but it had actually cleared out all the enemies within a certain range. If there was anyone who could survive this attack, then it could only be that elder. However, at this moment, the elder of the Azure Dragon Gang was also extremely frightened. Just now, he had instinctively sensed that there was an extremely terrifying and dangerous aura ahead, so he had stopped moving forward. However, he now realized that his stop had actually saved his life. Furthermore, even though he hadn't been at the core of the attack, he was still in an extremely miserable state. At this moment, blood was continuously flowing out of the elder's body. Just now, an extremely terrifying attractive force had suddenly appeared. Even though he had been extremely careful, he still hadn't been able to avoid the aftershock of the attack. That attractive force had seemed as if it was going to suck him into an unknown abyss. If not for the fact that this elder was at the very least a lower Supreme Divine Lord Realm cultivation base, he would likely have long fallen by now. At this moment, the elder stood silently in his original spot. Only after coming into such close contact with death would one know how much one feared death. Yi Xian looked indifferently at the people in front of him. He was waiting for the arrival of the Azure Dragon Gang leader. This was because Yi Xian believed that since the Azure Dragon Gang leader was determined to kill him, he would definitely not send these small fries to their deaths. Although Yi Xian hadn't broken through to the Supreme Divine Lord level yet, he was no longer a mere godly venerate like when he had first entered the Origin Source secret realm. Yi Xian was waiting for the main character to appear. Of course, if these people didn't know what was good for them, Yi Xian wouldn't mind killing them. There was no sound. Only a gentle breeze could be heard. Chapter 2585. Chapter 2585. Chapter 2585. The Chaos Sword unleashed its power. Some people still wanted to charge at Yi Xian, but Yi Xian merely glanced in that direction and they broke out in cold sweat. Up until now, Yi Xian had not made a move at all. He had only waved his hand and hundreds of people had fallen. Who would dare to provoke such a powerful force? Yi Xian was waiting. Silently waiting. As for those thousands of people, they only dared to wait with Yi Xian. Finally, the people Yi Xian was waiting for arrived. However, what made Yi Xian frown was that this time, it was not just the Azure Dragon Gang leader who had come, but the city lord as well. It seemed that all the powerful fighters on the first level had gathered here. Yi Xian frowned. If he really faced so many powerful fighters, Yi Xian had no chance of winning. However, Yi Xian could not retreat now. He wanted to see what these people were up to. At this moment, the Azure Dragon Gang leader was the first to step forward. He frowned as he looked at the severed limbs all over the ground. Did you kill them? The Azure Dragon Gang leader raised his head and looked at Yi Xian. His voice was filled with anger. However, anyone could see that his anger was just an act. All of this had been arranged by him. Moreover, the people who had died were just ordinary gang members. The Azure Dragon Gang leader had no reason to be so angry. Unless, of course, his anger was to find an excuse for himself. In fact, the Azure Dragon Gang's leader, the City Lord, and the others had a gathering when Yi Xian went to play with the Butterfly Love Pavilion. At that gathering, there was only one topic to discuss, and that was Yi Xian. According to their thinking, if Yi Xian was really related to the Butterfly Love Pavilion, then this matter would be a little tricky. Therefore, it was not only the Azure Dragon Gang leader who wanted to kill Yi Xian, but also the City Lord. The Butterfly Love Pavilion was a place that they did not dare to provoke. However, at the same time, the Butterfly Love Pavilion had never interfered with their affairs. Therefore, it was like a tacit agreement. There was almost no interaction between the two parties. At this moment, they speculated that Yi Xian's appearance was because Yi Xian wanted to use the Butterfly Love Pavilion's influence to harm the first level, snatching their benefits. Therefore, when the leader of the Azure Dragon Gang proposed to kill Yi Xian, all of them immediately agreed. Even those who did not agree chose to acquiesce. Because in their hearts, as long as Yi Xian did not die, he would definitely become a great disaster. At this moment, the leader of the Emptiness Gang took the initiative to speak. Naturally, the others did not speak up. Yi Xian looked at the leader of the Azure Dragon Gang and said indifferently, "So what? Didn't you want my life? I'm right here. Just come and get it." The leader of the Azure Dragon Gang frowned. He couldn't figure out what exactly Yi Xian wanted to do. After all, Yi Xian's current behavior was indeed a little strange. Brat, do you want to die? All right, I'll fulfill your wish. What are you all standing around for? Charge together and kill him. The leader of the Azure Dragon gang roared. He did not make a move himself, but he ordered the ordinary gang members around him to do so. This was because the leader of the Azure Dragon gang was worried that Yi Xian might have made some preparations. In his opinion, even though Yi Xian was already a superior celestial emperor, he still did not have the qualifications to challenge him. Therefore, he naturally felt that Yi Xian might have some kind of helper. At this moment, he ordered the ordinary gang members to all charge together. His goal was to investigate Yi Xian's background and find out whether Yi Xian really had any kind of backup. However, what surprised the leader of the Azure Dragon gang was that no one carried out his orders. In the past, these gang members would immediately move when they heard his orders. However, today, not a single one of them moved. The leader of the Azure Dragon gang was very surprised. One had to know that the Azure Dragon gang had always been a tyrant. They had never seen anyone afraid of trouble. Perhaps this Yi Xian was indeed a little strange, but he should not have made his people fear him. Therefore, the leader of the Azure Dragon gang narrowed his eyes at his subordinates and said angrily, "Didn't you hear what I said?" Many of the Azure Dragon gang members' legs were trembling. Of course, they knew their leader's methods. If they disobeyed his orders, they would end up in a terrible state. However, after witnessing Yi Xian's strangeness with their own eyes, how could they dare to act rashly? At this moment, these gang members were caught in a dilemma. On one hand, there was the incomparably strange Yi Xian, and on the other hand, there was their leader. It was indeed difficult for them to choose. "Do you want to die?" The leader of the Azure Dragon gang roared suddenly. This was the first time someone had disobeyed his orders. Moreover, it was not just one or two people, but almost everyone present. Hearing the leader's anger, an elder standing behind the leader of the Azure Dragon gang immediately shouted, "Follow me and kill! Kill Yi Xian. The leader will reward you handsomely." In groups of 2s and 3s, there were indeed a few gang members who followed him. Although they were very full, they still followed him. However, there were more people who did not move at all. The leader of the Azure Dragon gang furrowed his brows. He did not know why his gang members dared to disobey his orders. However, he soon understood. Yi Xian's current target was the leader of the Azure Dragon gang, the City Lord, and the others. Why would Yi Xian care about these gang members? With a wave of his hand, the Chaos Swordsman had already rushed out. The Chaos Swordsman had the ability to be absolutely invisible. It was not something that the leader of the Azure Dragon gang and the others could see through. Therefore, at this moment, what they saw was an extremely strange scene. They saw that the heads of those who rushed toward Yi Xian were all chopped off. Most importantly, the protective divine light on their bodies did not ripple at all. In front of them were all kinds of offensive divine powers. However, it was this incomparably strange scene that caused everyone's heads to disappear without a trace. No one knew what had happened, but once again, the gang leaders felt what it meant to be afraid. At this moment, a gang member cautiously walked up to the leader of the Azure Dragon gang and softly told him what had happened to them. This time, the leader of the Azure Dragon gang was not only frowning, but his face was full of dark clouds. Could it be that the Love Butterfly Pavilion had already made a move to help the gang leader? The leader of the Azure Dragon gang was not the only one who thought so. Everyone was thinking so. After all, this was too strange. As long as someone rushed toward Yi Xian, they would either die immediately or turn into a bloody mist. This time, even their heads disappeared without a trace. This made it difficult for them to understand what had happened. For a moment, none of the powerhouses, including the leader of the Azure Dragon gang, dared to make a move because they were also afraid. The Love Butterfly Pavilion gave them too much pressure. So much so that they did not dare to act rashly. Chapter 2586. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation in Absolute Victory. The mayor, who had been silent all this while, finally spoke. His words were acknowledged by the crowd. Indeed, if he was really from the Butterfly Love Pavilion, he would not have hidden himself like this. Humph, let me go and meet this kid. I want to see what he has up his sleeve. Suddenly, an old man stepped out from behind the mayor. He was an elite of the lower supreme divine state. It could be said that he had the power to kill Yi Xian. As he spoke, he charged towards Yi Xian. However, Yi Xian did not move at all. He just watched quietly. This was because Yi Xian knew that as long as the Chaos Swordsman was not exposed, none of them would be a match for the Chaos Swordsman. The Chaos Swordsman's ability to hide and its special ability to be immune to all laws gave it an unimaginable strength. Unless one could detect it and put up a defense, no one would be able to survive the sneak attack of the Chaos Swordsman. After all, most people relied on the protection of the laws. However, the Chaos Swordsman was immune to all laws. Wouldn't that mean that these people were defenseless against the Chaos Swordsman? Trying to defend against the Chaos Swordsman's attack with just their physical body? It was almost impossible because the Chaos Swordsman had another special characteristic, which was its powerful physical attack. The terrifying Chaos Swordsman could be said to be invincible as long as he was not detected. Such a powerful existence could only be created by the system. After all, everyone cultivated the power of the laws. How could anyone be immune to the power of the laws? Purely cultivating the power of physical attacks. The old man charged towards Yi Xian. Unfortunately, he didn't take more than a few steps before collapsing. This time, he was so close that his blood almost splattered on the Green Dragon Gang leader and the others. The strange aura had also spread to these elites. At this moment, these elites finally understood why the Green Dragon Gang members did not dare to step forward. It was too scary, too strange. Perhaps death was not too likely. At the very least, there were many people here who were not afraid of death. However, the key was that they did not even know how they died, and they were already dead. This was somewhat terrifying. At that moment, weren't those people exactly like that? Even when they died, they didn't understand why they died. As for those who were still alive, how could they not be afraid? Damn it! Who are you? Come out! The city lord let out a furious roar as an incomparably powerful force immediately erupted from his body. This power turned into a ray of light and quickly spread out in all directions. This light was a divine ability that the city lord was quite proud of. This was because not only did the light possess powerful offensive capabilities, but it could also be combined with divine sense. Wherever the light passed, no life aura could escape the city lord's senses. However, this time around, the city lord had failed. It was not that the light did not cover the Chaos Swordsman. It was because the Chaos Swordsmen were not affected by the light at all. When the light swept across the Chaos Swordsman, the mayor could only feel that it was as lifeless as a piece of rock. Pest! Beside the leader of the Azure Dragon Gang, an elder who was standing side by side with him suddenly had his head chopped off and sent flying. One had to know that the elder was still watching Yi Xian a moment ago and was completely unprepared. Who would have thought that in the next moment, he would be killed? This time, the Azure Dragon Gang leader was scared out of his wits. After all, at such a close distance, one of his elders died just like that. However, he did not notice it at all. It was impossible to say that he was not afraid. Suddenly, Yi Xian, who had not moved at all until now, moved. Step by step, he walked towards the Azure Dragon Gang leader and the others. Yi Xian knew that if he went over now, no one would dare to do anything to him. Of course, if there was anyone, the Chaos Swordsmen would immediately kill them. It could be said that as long as the Chaos Swordsmen were not discovered, the lives of these people were all in the hands of Yi Xian. As long as Yi Xian willed it, no matter if it was the Azure Dragon Gang leader or the city lord, they would all die without a doubt. Yi Xian walked forward step by step, but it was as if he was stepping on the hearts of these people. It could be said that these people were extremely nervous. This was because Yi Xian's methods were too strange. This was because Yi Xian's strength was unquestionable. No one dared to use their cultivation realm to measure Yi Xian's strength. This was because Yi Xian's strength could not be measured by cultivation realm. One had to know that they did not even see Yi Xian make a move, but so many people had already died. Among them, there was no lack of powerful elders. Therefore, everyone knew that Yi Xian had a mysterious power protecting him. In other words, Yi Xian had a mysterious method that could kill any one of them. What do you want? The Azure Dragon Gang leader was extremely nervous. His whole body was shining with all kinds of defensive lights, but he did not know that the Chaos Swordsmen were right beside him, even within his defensive lights. Killing him was just a thought from Yi Xian. You tell me, what do I want? Yi Xian looked at the Azure Dragon Gang leader and asked calmly. This is not the first time you have attacked me, right? Back then, you were the one who sent Elder Jean to assassinate me, right? And today, you have gathered so many experts and your subordinates. If you are not here to kill me, are you here to welcome me? Yi Xian looked at the Azure Dragon Gang leader indifferently. Today, this guy must die. Kid, I admit that your methods are impressive, but don't forget that we have so many experts here. Do you want to fight against so many of us by yourself? The Azure Dragon Gang leader mustered up his courage and said to Yi Xian. However, Yi Xian smiled and said, Experts? Why don't I see any experts? Following Yi Xian's words, the Azure Dragon Gang leader felt as if a gust of wind blew past him. However, after a while, there was a burst of sound beside him. When he turned around to look, he discovered that all the elders belonging to the Azure Dragon Gang had actually died at this moment. Yi Xian waved his hand and the countless interspatial rings flew towards him. After a while, Yi Xian took them. When he did all this, Yi Xian was so casual. He did not even have the slightest precaution. The experts you are talking about, are you referring to those corpses? After taking the interspatial rings, Yi Xian turned around and said to the Azure Dragon Gang leader. The Azure Dragon Gang leader felt as if his whole body was cold. It was because he was frightened by Yi Xian. Because at this moment, the Azure Dragon Gang leader realized that it would be easy for Yi Xian to kill him. Chapter 2587. Beheading and subduing. The Azure Dragon Gang's gang leader wanted to beg for mercy. However, he had been a gang leader for a long time. He couldn't open his mouth to beg for mercy. Therefore, he only asked, What exactly do you want to do? Yi Xian looked at the Azure Dragon Gang's gang leader and laughed loudly. What do I want to do? I should be the one asking you that. Or rather, whatever you want to do to me, I'll do the same to you. I have never wanted to do anything to you. The Azure Dragon Gang's gang leader was afraid. The words that came out of his mouth were clearly lacking in confidence. As for the city lord and the others, they were also incomparably afraid. It was too terrifying. It was difficult for them not to be afraid of that scene. More than a dozen supreme divine lords had their heads cut off by a mysterious power at the same time. How could they not be afraid of such a scene? In fact, at their level, even if their heads were chopped off, even if their bodies were crushed into powder, as long as their divine souls were still there, as long as their divine cores were not crushed, there was a way to resurrect them. However, this mysterious power had actually destroyed their divine souls and crushed their divine cores at the same time as it chopped off their divine cores. How could they not be afraid of such a terrifying and strange power? Suddenly, one of the experts turned around and tried to escape. Unfortunately, as soon as he moved, his head actually fell from his body. Only the headless corpse continued to move forward a bit. Did I say you could leave? Yi Xian raised his head and looked at the people in the city lord's direction. His tone was filled with inviolable dominance. No one answered because no one dared to speak. However, Yi Xian only glanced at them once more before continuing to look at the Azure Dragon Gang's gang leader. I'll give you two choices. Shatter your own divine core. That way you can avoid some pain. Otherwise, I'll do it myself. Yi Xian said indifferently. However, his words were so cruel. Shatter his own divine core? Who would be able to bear to do that? Yi Xian, don't go too far. Although I admit that your methods are impressive if I... Poochie. Blood splattered everywhere. It was the arm of the leader of the Azure Dragon Gang, who was protected by layers of divine light, directly separated from his body. If you what? Go on, it's fine. I have a lot of time. Yi Xian looked at the Azure Dragon Gang leader mockingly. It seemed like this guy didn't understand the situation. Even at a time like this, he still wanted to threaten Yi Xian. The leader of the Azure Dragon Gang endured the pain of losing his arm, but he didn't dare to say another word. Unfortunately, regardless of whether he spoke or not, Yi Xian was determined not to let him off the hook today. It seems that you want me to make a move. Well then, enjoy your journey of death. Following Yi Sun's words, the other arm of the Azure Dragon Gang leader was separated from his body. What followed was countless attacks. None of these attacks were fatal. They merely left a wound on the Azure Dragon Gang's leader's body. However, it was precisely because of this that the physical pain, as well as the panic in his mind, became even more terrifying. At this moment, the Azure Dragon Gang leader's face was incomparably distorted. It wasn't that he didn't want to attack Yi Xian. In fact, when he had lost his first arm, he had already launched several attacks at Yi Xian. However, the strange thing was that his attacks seemed to be blocked by an invisible force. They simply couldn't reach Yi Xian's side. Suddenly, Yi Xian raised his hand. What was he trying to do? Many people were thinking this in their hearts. The Azure Dragon Gang leader was even more alarmed. This was because he knew that if Yi Xian was going to make a move, it would definitely be directed at him. Sure enough, Yi Xian's target was the Azure Dragon Gang leader. At this moment, the gang leader of the Azure Dragon Gang sensed a mysterious power that was constantly trying to extract his godhead. It was an extremely uncomfortable feeling. It was as if a hand was trying to pull his heart out while he was still alive. However, this force was targeting the divine spark of the Azure Dragon Gang leader. Divine spark stripping. This was the divine spark stripping technique that Yi Xian possessed. However, Yi Xian had never used it before. Today, Yi Xian was going to strip the divine spark of the Azure Dragon Gang leader. The Azure Dragon Gang leader was terrified, but he was powerless. Although the divine spark was his, how could he control it? However, no one knew. It was as if the divine spark was a part of his body, but that was all there was to it. This divine spark couldn't be said to be under the control of its master. Amidst the Azure Dragon Gang leader's panic, his divine spark was actually being extracted by Yi Xian while he was still alive. Only the Azure Dragon Gang leader himself knew how it felt to see his own divine spark being stripped away with his own eyes. As the divine spark was stripped away, the various forces that had been circling the Azure Dragon Gang leader gradually disappeared. A moment later, he fell toward the ground. Of course, the moment he came into contact with the ground, he would die. No. Yi Xian, you will die a horrible death. You will die a horrible death. The Azure Dragon Gang leader cursed loudly. Unfortunately, this was all he could do. After all, whether Yi Xian would die a horrible death was still unknown, but he definitely wouldn't die a horrible death. Then, it's your turn now. City Lord, you've been sending people to monitor me. What do you want from me? Yi Xian didn't feel as much enmity towards the City Lord as he did towards the Azure Dragon Gang leader. After all, the City Lord hadn't done anything excessive to Yi Xian. In fact, he had even helped Yi Xian in the past. However, Yi Xian still had to subdue the City Lord. If Yi Xian left the secondary realm and went to the primary realm, then Yi Xian would be most worried about the safety of Luo and the others. Yi Xian, I admit that I've treated you well. Don't tell me that you want to kill me as well today? The City Lord looked at Yi Xian. Although the City Lord had seen Yi Xian's strength with his own eyes, he wasn't as impulsive and brainless as the Azure Dragon Gang leader. Moreover, the City Lord didn't think that he had done anything to harm Yi Xian. Of course, today was an exception. In fact, when he came here today, he already wanted to kill Yi Xian. No, the City Lord has misunderstood. Of course I won't kill you. Hand over your quintessence fragment. I may need to leave for a while, so I need you to protect a few people for me. When I return, I will naturally return your quintessence fragment to you. Yi Xian said indifferently. This was Yi Xian's objective. Indeed, the City Lord hadn't done anything to harm Yi Xian. However, Yi Xian had to temporarily obtain the City Lord's quintessence fragment for the sake of Luo and the others. The City Lord frowned. However, did he have a choice? In the City Lord's mind, if Yi Xian could easily strip the Azure Dragon Gang leader of his quintessence fragment, then it wasn't impossible for him to strip the City Lord of his quintessence fragment. Alright, I agree. Chapter 2588. The ruler awakens. The City Lord handed over his quintessence shard without any hesitation. Yi Xian casually waved his hand and collected the quintessence shard. He then said, at this point, I don't want to hide anything anymore. I won't be staying in this lower realm for long. If it wasn't for the fact that I still have friends here, perhaps I would have left long ago. I've tolerated your little tricks from before. However, I didn't expect the Azure Dragon Gang to mobilize people to attack me this time. Therefore, I can't tolerate it anymore. From today onwards, I think it's time for the City Lord of the First Layer to change. Since you know about the Butterfly Love Pavilion, you should also know that the primary realm isn't a place you can provoke. Behave yourselves. Otherwise, I don't mind killing all of you. Yi Xian's tone was extremely calm, but in the ears of those experts, it was like muffled thunder. At their level, they naturally knew what Yi Xian was talking about when he said the main realm and the secondary realm. They also understood that the primary realm was an existence they couldn't reach. It could be said that no matter how high their cultivation was, to the people of the primary realm, They were nothing more than existences that could be obliterated at will. At this moment, they finally understood why Yi Xian could kill them so easily even though his cultivation was so much lower than theirs. They regretted provoking Yi Xian. One had to know that if they could establish a relationship with the people of the primary realm, the benefits they could obtain would be unimaginable. They didn't expect that they wouldn't cherish the opportunity that was placed in front of them. It could be said that there was no need to say anything more about what happened next. After settling Luo Luo, Mi Li, and Fian down, Yi Xian headed straight for the primary realm. This was because Yi Xian knew very well that the city lord and the others couldn't do anything to Luo Luo, Mi Li, and Mi Li. In addition, the three of them had a large amount of origin divine crystals in their hands. Therefore their strength naturally increased very quickly. It wouldn't be long before they could rapidly increase their cultivation, so naturally, they had nothing to fear. However, when Yi Xian arrived at the primary realm, he was shocked to find that there was no battle at all. The so-called trial was actually supported by countless resources. All they had to do was complete their cultivation within a set time limit. It could be said that to Yi Xian, this wasn't the slightest bit of pressure. The guardians were different from the order enforcers. The number of guardians was small, but they possessed a lot of resources. Thus, when Yi Xian arrived at the main realm, however, he was surprised to find that there was not much to do at all. The resources were almost limitless. Of course. For Yi Xian. After all, he had relied on devouring to increase his cultivation. After all, he was. Only after arriving at the main realm did Yi Xian find out that there weren't many protectors. Including him, there were only a total of 100 people. Of these 100 people, only 12 would be chosen to become protectors. The others would become the followers of these protectors. 12 out of 100 people was a very low probability, but compared to the other forces, this probability was very high. Most importantly, the guardians were focused on nurturing them. Even if they didn't pass the selection, they would still be very powerful. 500 years passed in the blink of an eye. Yi Xian had been thinking of ways to obtain resources. Whether it was to train or to exchange for origin divine crystals from others, his goal was to obtain origin divine crystals as quickly as possible. Yi Xian hadn't stepped out of the primary realm in 500 years. Of course, he had also obtained a lot of rewards. My lord, this is your quota for this month. Please accept it. A puppet came to Yi Xian's cave abode. Unlike the others, Yi Xian chose a cave and opened up his cave abode. Puppets were very popular in the primary realm. After all, the primary realm only had those 100 guardians, 12 guardians, and less than 1,000 servants. Therefore most of the time the puppets were the ones doing the work. Yi Xian had also made some puppets to serve him. This puppet was one of them. Yi Xian nodded. With a wave of his hand, the 10,000 origin divine crystals were all devoured by him. He had waited for a month for this opportunity to devour. Of course, he had obtained a lot of benefits. Ding! System notification. Host has broken through. Current cultivation level. Low-level Supreme God. Did he break through to the low-level Supreme God? Yi Xian's lips curled up slightly. That was because the low-level Supreme God represented the completion of the trial. There was no such thing as grades in the primary realm. Every realm was only divided into 3 grades. As for the inferior Supreme God Emperor, that was the minimum requirement to pass the trial. 500 years of seclusion was finally over. It was dry and boring. However, the rewards were bountiful. Yi Xian walked outside. This time, he was going to the Peak of Glory. The Peak of Glory was the name of a large hall. That was the headquarters of the Guardians. In fact, 100 years ago, the Peak of Glory had issued a full mobilization order. The Divine Ruler had awakened. However, for an existence of the Divine Ruler's level, awakening was a long process. The Guardians had always been monitoring the Divine Ruler. However, that was all they could do. Before the Divine Ruler fully awoke, there was an absolute defense around him. No power could break through it. Unless they could gather all 4 ultimate divine artifacts. Unfortunately, how could it be so easy to gather all 4 ultimate divine artifacts? Perhaps only Yi Xian had a chance now. As Yi Xian's strength increased, he discovered that there was a mysterious power in his body. This power was left behind by the primal chaos seal. Through this mysterious power, Xian could form an inexplicable connection with the primal chaos seal. Moreover, as Xian's strength increased, this connection became more and more obvious. Although Xian didn't know why this was happening, or how it was useful to him, Xian couldn't do anything about it. The power left behind by the primal chaos seal wasn't something Xian could control. Xian quickly arrived at the peak of glory. However, he discovered that there was something different about the place today. In the past, the 12 protectors were usually stationed in different areas, and it was very difficult for them to gather together. However, today, not only were the 12 protectors gathered, but even the best of the challengers were gathered here. Clearly, something was going to happen this time. As expected, as soon as Xian walked in, he heard the sounds of conversation coming from inside. The divine ruler has awakened. Can I just sit here and wait for death? No. The divine ruler has the power to destroy the heavens and earth. We're no match for him at all. Besides, the keepers of order have already submitted to him. If we attack, we'll only be killed. Chapter 2589. The creator sovereign Xian listened in from the outside, only to discover that the 12 protectors were divided. Some felt that they should fight to the death with the sovereign. Others felt that they were no match for the sovereign. Xian silently listened. In any case, he already knew the habits of these guardians. These guardians would always argue before they decided on anything. Once one side received enough support, then all of them would unconditionally obey the unified order. As expected, 3 days later, the side that decided to go to war won. Those who had opposed immediately began to plan how and where to fight. Although Xian had already become a protector, he wasn't an official protector. After all, there were only 12 protectors. As for the others, they could only be considered backups. The protectors were extremely efficient. When they decided to fight, they would fight. Once they reached a consensus, they would attack without hesitation. Everyone, including Xian, received the order to go to war at the same time. When Xian saw the sovereign for the first time, he finally understood how terrifying he was. Ignoring everything else, just the sheer size of the sovereign was enough to make countless people tremble in fear. Xian and the others were currently traversing the void. Beneath their feet was the vast god realm. Not far from them were the source secret realms. In fact, Xian could even see specks of secret realms. As it turned out, those originally mysterious and unfathomable secret realms that couldn't be located at all, once one's strength reached the level of Supreme God Emperor and truly grasped the power of laws, one would discover that they were actually fixed when looking at them from the void. It was only because of the power of laws that one couldn't find their location and location. Without grasping the power of laws, it was very difficult to see all of this. Xian had already grasped the power of laws. He didn't borrow them, but directly controlled them. Generally speaking, only one law controller could exist at a time for each law controller. That was why there were so few paramount god emperors. Becoming a sovereign meant gaining the approval of all the laws. At the same time, one could use all of the laws. In fact, one could even strip a law controller of their status. The sovereign of God was invincible. This was practically everyone's consensus before this because they were the rulers of this world. However, when the sovereign of God wanted to destroy the world, then even if they couldn't, they had to. At this moment, there were over 10,000 people floating around the god sovereign. They were the keepers of order. As for the guardians, there were only a few dozen of them. The disparity in strength was so great that even Xian did not know how this battle would end. However, everyone knew that this was the final battle. If they lost, then everything would be destroyed. Even if it was Xian, it was bound to be a calamity. No one said anything because there was no need to. Suddenly, the 12 guardians summoned their own Dharma treasures. However, to Xian's surprise, 3 of them summoned Primal Chaos Seal. Not much, this was just an imitation, not the real Primal Chaos Seal. All of a sudden, Xian seemed to understand something. The reason why there were only 12 guardians, and why there would only be 12 forever, was probably because of these 12 treasures. These treasures should all be imitations of the 4 ultimate divine artifacts. Because they were not the real ultimate divine artifacts, they had only prepared 3 sets. However, even if they were imitations of the ultimate divine artifacts, they were definitely refined from the essence of heaven and earth. Having 3 sets was already the limit. Attack! Suddenly, a voice rang out. All of a sudden, Over 1,000 keepers of order rushed toward Yixian and the others. Each of these keepers of order had incomparably powerful strength. Even the weakest one had the cultivation of a supreme divine emperor. With such terrifying strength, it could be said that without the might of Dharma treasures, the mere 12 guardians would not be a match for them at all. However, at this moment, the Dharma treasures in the guardians' hands erupted with a bright light. This light was extremely bright and quickly condensed into a light screen that rushed toward the keepers of order. Without a sound, the keepers of order had already disappeared into nothingness. This terrifying power was simply unimaginable. Die! Suddenly, a powerhouse among the keepers of order attacked. He suddenly waved his hand, and a corner of a world smashed toward the guardians. A world! Yixian could even clearly see the panic and helplessness of the people in that world. However, this world did indeed have a complete structure of laws. In other words, this attack was actually a complete set of laws attack. Unfortunately, even so, it was completely useless. Because the 12 Dharma treasures borrowed the power of the 4 ultimate divine artifacts. Back down! Suddenly, a voice rang out from the unseen world. This voice instantly transmitted through the 9 heavens. Even the people in the secret realms looked up in surprise and doubtfully checked the source of the voice. In front of Yixian's eyes, a strange change was occurring. From the void, from the countless secret realms, and from the divine realm, streaks of starlight were being drawn out and rapidly condensed. The ruler of God. The ruler's avatar. The ruler of God did not have a physical body. He only had a core of light like a fog. However, he could transform into any form and freely travel through any world. At this moment, he was summoning all the clones he had left behind in the world. These clones were left behind when he traveled the world. At the same time, they were also his scattered power. Yixian looked on in shock. It could be said that the ruler of God's power shocked him to the core. Suddenly, the mysterious power in Yixian's body began to stir, as if it wanted to break free of Yixian's body. What was going on? Yixian knew this mysterious power was left behind by the seal of chaos, but why was it acting so strangely? Ding! Warning! Warning! The host's body is being modified by an unknown power. Ding! Warning! Warning! The system has lost control of the host's body. Ding! Warning! Warning! The host has been determined to be dead. Executing the ultimate destruction plan. Ding! Plan cancelled. The host's body has been detected. What was going on? Yixian listened to the system's notifications in a daze. Just now, Yixian hadn't done anything. In fact, it could even be said that he hadn't felt anything. Yet the system was giving him a bunch of baffling notifications. What was going on? Suddenly, the ruler of God's voice rang out beside him. You are a creator. What was going on? Yixian was dumbfounded. He didn't understand what was going on. Suddenly, Yixian felt a string of unfamiliar memories appear in his mind. It was a person, a giant, and at the same time a woman. She had roamed the world, carefully taking care of everything. He had modified all life, bestowing them with spirituality. Those pairs of scarlet eyes, those people, beasts, and creatures that had only known how to kill by instinct, finally gained consciousness and began to cultivate. Chapter 2590. The final chapter of the God world. This battle had lasted for 300 million years. Everything in the world had been destroyed, and only the sovereign and this woman remained. The sovereign of God was on his last breath, as if he might die at any moment. Suddenly, the woman looked back at the world she'd destroyed. She turned to look at the sovereign of God, stopped all battle, and sighed helplessly. She'd stripped the sovereign of God of half of his power and rebuilt the world. As for herself, she'd transformed into one of the 4 ultimate divine artifacts. These memories fused into Yixian's body. Yixian was astonished, alarmed, helpless, and terrified. Yixian was puzzled, confused, innocent, and resolute. It turned out that the origin of the world hid such a secret. No wonder the sovereign of God had fallen despite being the sovereign of God. This was because the sovereign of God had lost half of his power. Only when that power returned to the sovereign of God could he be considered a true sovereign. No wonder the sovereign of God wanted to destroy everything. He wanted to take back what belonged to him. Unfortunately, he'd been so anxious that he'd forgotten the existence of the sovereign of creation. Although the sovereign of creation had lost most of her power, She still had the 4 ultimate divine artifacts. Was this how it all started? Yi Xian helplessly shook his head. Only now did he truly understand the origin of this world. You actually obtained the sovereign's power? I'm going to kill you. Boom. Suddenly, a new world formed around Yi Xian. This wasn't an illusion, but a real world. At the same time, countless people charged at Yi Xian. There were probably hundreds of millions of them. But at the same time, Yi Xian sensed that he'd lost all of his power. Deprive. This was the sovereign of God's power. But at this moment, Yi Xian sensed a new power rapidly emerging from his body. It was the power of creation. This was the unique power of creation formed by the fusion of the 4 ultimate divine artifacts. This power required the support of anything in order to give birth to everything. Crumble. The world crumbled, and everything vanished. Around Yi Xian, the 4 ultimate divine artifacts were rapidly coalescing. No. Impossible. The sovereign of creation disappeared long ago. Why did you appear? The 4 ultimate divine weapons quickly condensed, and a moment later, they condensed into an extremely beautiful woman. It could be said that any creature who saw him would find it hard to extricate themselves. However, the woman smiled as she looked at Yi Xian, then charged towards the god ruler. Light suddenly burst out. However, when the light disappeared, so did the god sovereign and the creator sovereign. That's it? Yi Xian had never imagined that the battle he had prepared for would end in such an inexplicable manner. Could it be that the sovereign lord of the gods had been destroyed? Everyone was stunned. No one could react. The current situation was too strange. Look! Someone shouted in surprise, because they had discovered that streaks of light were continuously rushing towards Yi Xian from beside Yi Xian. It was the power of laws, the power of countless laws. The law was recognizing Yi Xian. No, it was more accurate to say that the creator and the power of law were acknowledging the creator. This was because Yi Xian's body still contained remnants of the sovereign's power. Disappeared. Everything was about to disappear. It was as if Yi Xian's body had disappeared along with it. All Yi Xian possessed was his will, the will to control everything. No. Suddenly, Yi Xian realized that the laws in his body weren't complete. They seemed to be missing quite a bit. Suddenly, Yi Xian raised his head and looked into the air. As expected, the godly sovereign hadn't disappeared. Light gathered once more, and the godly sovereign reappeared. Damn it! That wretched creator sovereign, how dare he deprive me of my power? Deprive him of his power? Yi Xian suddenly realized that his power had come from the godly sovereign. No wonder his power wasn't complete, because a portion of it was still in the godly sovereign's body. Looking at the 4 ultimate divine weapons around him, Yi Xian felt an inexplicable sadness in his heart. This was because this creator sovereign, whom he'd only met once, had given him such a great opportunity, only to immediately disappear. In fact, perhaps the creator sovereign had already planned to do this from the moment he discovered Yi Xian. After all, Yi Xian had a complete constitution of laws. Such a physique was not something that everyone possessed. Perhaps, from the first time he'd encountered Yi Xian in the forbidden land of chaos, he'd already planned everything. Damn it, you deserve to die. Be destroyed. Suddenly, the godly sovereign roared at Yi Xian. At the same time, everything around Yi Xian began to rapidly disintegrate. Even the quasi-guardian next to him transformed into specks of light and vanished. What terrifying power! Yi Xian was shocked to discover that everything around him was rapidly disintegrating. Space was shattering, time was shattering, everything was rapidly disintegrating. Suddenly, Yi Xian raised his hand. Everything around him was restored in an instant. Destruction and restoration. Yi Xian and the godly sovereign each wielded 2 extremes of power. In other words, while the godly sovereign could destroy everything, Yi Xian could restore everything. However, there seemed to be no limit to this kind of battle. In truth, if this battle continued, there would be no outcome. Yi Xian's mind raced. Seal. How exactly could he seal this guy? Suddenly, Yi Xian glanced at the 4 ultimate divine weapons. Since the creator sovereign had left them behind, they should have their uses. Yi Xian searched through his memories. Finally, he found a vague memory in the depths of his mind. This memory didn't belong to Yi Xian, but it clearly contained the ultimate secret of the 6-syllable mantra and the 4 ultimate divine weapons. The Seal of Eternity. Yi Xian looked up at the godly sovereign, thinking of the hegemon of eternity. Could it be that the hegemon of eternity knew everything about him and had even led him here? Otherwise, how could there be such a coincidence? A physique of laws and the six-syllable mantra. It seemed that all of this was tailor-made for Yi Xian to use the seal of eternity. Yi Xian turned to look at someone in the distance. It was an old man, the one who'd brought Yi Xian to the Kunlun divine realm. He was Mi Mu's master. However, Yi Xian wasn't looking at him because of the man, but because of his bloodline. Boiling sacrifice. This guy had a special bloodline, but in Yi Xian's eyes, he was only useful as a sacrifice. It was as if half of everything had already been arranged. Yes, it was destiny. Destiny wasn't a power of law. Like luck, it was ephemeral and unpredictable, but it seemed to exist. At this moment, Yi Xian's heart was strangely calm. He seemed to sense a special realm, a realm of transcendence. With a wave of his hand, Yi Xian extracted the old man's blood. The blood quickly coalesced into rays of light in the air. These rays of light converged into a formation, and Yi Xian continued to channel power into it. It was only a moment, but it also seemed like an eternity. All of a sudden, the formation disappeared. However, the divine ruler was shocked to discover that all of his power had been sealed away. The seal of eternity, the seal of eternity. This was the essence of the seal of eternity. Yi Xian walked forward step by step. Everyone quickly distanced themselves from him. The strength that Yi Xian had displayed was too terrifying. What are you trying to do? The divine ruler was stunned. He was an eternal ruler, but today he'd fallen into a forbidden zone where death was certain. He hated the creator of the universe. Unfortunately, no matter how much he hated the creator, there was nothing he could do. You can go to hell now. Yi Xian raised his hand and brought the God-Slayer down. Boom! Countless profound energies surged toward Yi Xian. Everyone, no matter where they were, felt an inexplicable pressure weighing down on them. In the divine realm, countless mystic realms and creatures of the void prostrated themselves on the ground. It was because they had a new master. This new master was Yi Xian. Chapter 2591. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The Starry Sky Devouring System, ding. The host has killed the ruler of the heavenly realm. The devouring key is rewarded. The system can be upgraded. Yi Xian raised an eyebrow. The ruler of the heavenly realm was dead. He had inherited the power of the ruler of the heavenly realm, so he was the new ruler of the heavenly realm. Between heaven and earth, he was the ruler. No one could compete with him, so he did not have to worry about anything. He could directly upgrade the system. Ding! The system is upgrading. The current progress is 1%. Yi Xian checked the progress and found that the upgrade was estimated to take 1 day. This was like a snap of the fingers for him. Ding! The system is upgrading. The current progress is 100%. The system upgrade is complete. The host has obtained the Starry Sky Devouring System. The Starry Sky Devouring System. Yi Xian's eyes lit up. It turned out that the heavenly realm was not the end. Just as he thought, he would go to outer space, which was the heavenly realm beyond. At the same time, he also knew why the system had malfunctioned when he ascended to the heavenly realm from the immortal realm. There was a reason. The devouring system is a product of the third race in the universe, the human race. It is used to select human talents and distribute them throughout the universe. They did this because there is a great crisis in the universe. The first race in the universe, the Qianji clan, was created for the human race. Later they gained intelligence and betrayed the human race. They called themselves the Qianji clan and opposed the human race. They were determined to destroy the human race and unify the universe. Left with no choice, the human race and the other races in the universe established the Wanluo Federation to fight against the Qianji clan. After finding out about this, Yi Xian felt a headache coming on. It turned out that he had obtained the devouring system for a reason. He was chosen by the human race in the universe. To be precise, he was chosen by a member of the Qianji clan called D-Air. D-Air was a robot invented by the first person of the human race, Xing Bo. At the same time, D-Air had a robot brother called D-E. It was D-Air who used the intelligence of the robot race to invent the devouring system. He distributed it throughout the universe to select human talents with potential. D-E, on the other hand, killed his own creator, Xing Bo, betrayed the human race, and established the Tianji clan, and declared that he would destroy the human race and unify the universe. To put it simply, the mechanical race of the myriad Luo Federation and the number one race of the universe, the Heaven's Legacy race, were of the same origin. After understanding all this, Yi Xian felt that the God realm was too insignificant, like a drop of water in the vast ocean. Then, he continued to learn about the history of the universe. In the universe, the smallest unit was a planet, followed by a galaxy, starfield, astral boundary, universe, and so on. The continent Yi Xian was standing on was a planet. It was divided into 9 levels of heaven, and the God realm was on the 9th level. Further up was the heavens beyond heaven, which was the universe. When he had ascended to the God realm from the immortal realm, the reason why the devouring system had suddenly malfunctioned and entered a semi-shielded state was because the 9th heaven of the God realm was very close to the outland. If he did not enter a semi-shielded state, he might be detected by the Heaven's Legacy race and be obliterated along with the planet. Ding! The realm has been updated. Host, please take a look. At this moment, the system prompted again. Realm update? Yi Xian hurriedly checked. He had inherited the ruler of gods and was now a ruler of gods. But now, the system showed that he was only a first-order planetary core. Above the planetary core were meteors, satellites, planets, stars, and so on. Yi Xian had some understanding of this. He had transmigrated, so he was familiar with it. The Earth was a planet, the Moon was a satellite orbiting the Earth, and the Sun was a star. Who would have thought that the realms of the universe were divided in this way? But that was not important. What Yi Xian cared about was the myriad Luo Federation. The human race of the universe had established the myriad Luo Federation with the other races of the universe to fight against the first race of the universe, the Heaven's Legacy race. The myriad Luo Federation was divided into 2 camps. One was technology, and the other was cultivation. The technology camp was led by the Everlasting Dynasty. They mainly used technology to build a country. They used mechas and warships to engage in interstellar battles. They also used gene cultivation fluids to improve the human body. That was why they called themselves New Humans. For example, Yi Xian was now called the ruler of gods, but that was just a name for a realm. Gods were actually just humans who had reached a certain level of strength. As for the cultivation camp, it was led by the 10 Ju celestial palaces. That was to say, they were like Yi Xian's current cultivation method. However, they were no longer cultivating reality. Instead, they were cultivating a higher level of stars. That was why they could also be called cultivators. It was just that they had not forgotten their roots, so they called themselves cultivators. Those powerful cultivators could even dismantle warships with their bare hands and split planets with their swords. However, at that moment, the system gave him another notification. Ding! The host's planet has not been verified by the Federation. The system rewards the host with the title of Interstellar Traveler. Please head to the nearest planet, Sky River Star, for verification. Otherwise, this ownerless planet may be discovered by other interstellar travelers. Ding! The system has automatically created a Federation identity card for the host. Ding! The system recommends that the host become an interstellar mercenary. Hearing this, Yi Xian checked and found that his current identity was that of a native of Heavenly River Planet. As long as he went to Heavenly River Planet to conduct a planet survey and certification, this planet would be under his name. As long as he applied for closed management, foreign interstellar travelers would not be able to enter. If others were to verify first, this planet would no longer belong to him. At that time, those interstellar travelers could do whatever they wanted here. This was Yi Xian's home. He would not allow such a thing to happen. At that moment, he flew all the way up. Not long after, he broke through the planet's protective layer. At that moment, Yi Xian was deep in outer space, which was also known as Sky Beyond Heaven. The Interstellar Traveler title could reduce the probability of encountering a cosmic space rift. Otherwise, with his strength, he would be sucked into a cosmic space rift and then crushed. Outer space was extremely unstable. There were a large number of cosmic space rifts. The Interstellar Traveler title reduced the probability of Yi Xian encountering a cosmic space rift. It was said that those powerful cultivators could also use magic treasures and the like to carry out interstellar travel. Some people could even carry a cosmic space rift with their bodies. At that moment, Yi Xian looked at the planet below him. Thousands of thoughts ran through his mind. He checked the system and found that the system recommended him to arrive at Sky River Star within a year for verification. A year was nothing to him now. However, he also found a system notification saying that if he wanted to carry out interstellar travel, he had to empty the Devour space. Otherwise, the Devour space might collapse. In other words, those people in the Devour space had to be released. Not a single thing could be left behind. At the same time, those cultivation techniques, magic treasures, bloodlines, and so on would be emptied. Even the flow of the Devour space would be the same as the universe. Although he was now in Sky Beyond Heaven, he was still within the range of this planet. Therefore, it was not considered interstellar travel. This planet is divided into 9 heavens. Let's call it 9 heavens star. As for interstellar travel, let's wait for a while. Yi Xian thought to himself. Then, he told his family and friends the good news. Then, he released everyone in the Devour space to the heavenly realm. While he was at it, he married Mi Li and Fian. Of course, he did not forget Luo Luo. Luo Luo had followed him from the first heaven. She had been with him for countless years. Naturally, he would not forget her. Now, Yi Xian had a total of 5 wives. They were Song Sui Jing, Guan Yulan, Luo Luo, Mi Li, and Fian. It was a pity that his Devour space could not take anyone or anything with him. 1 month later. It's time to leave and carry out the planetary survey certification. I have to do it as soon as possible. It would be troublesome if someone discovered me first. Yi Xian thought to himself. He said goodbye to everyone and returned to Sky Beyond Heaven. Last time, he did not leave the 9 heavens star. Therefore, it did not count as interstellar travel. Chapter 2592. Translator, Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations Burial Star Field Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations. As Yi Xian left the 9 heavens star for interstellar travel, the starry sky devouring system in his body was reset once again. After the reset, the system's ultimate mission was triggered. Destroy the number 1 race in the universe, the Tianji race. Yi Xian now had some understanding of the Tianji race. In the entire galaxy, the Tianji race occupied a vast area in the first universe and was currently the number 1 overlord in the galaxy. As for the human race, due to their large population, they now occupied the 3rd universe. In the 3rd and 2nd universes, as well as the other small universes, there were many other races in the universe. The 9 heaven star technique, which was currently at the lowest level, was only one of the most common cultivation techniques in the Wanluo Federation, which was jointly established by the human race in the 3rd universe and the other races in the other universes. Moreover, in the gift bag he received from the reset of the starry sky devouring system, there were only 3 ordinary treasures: the streamer star armor, the heavenly star sword, and the flying star shuttle. Other than that, there was only one that had become the system's currency, the source of devouring. Although Yi Xian still had the system's hand of devouring and the force devouring skill, in his current situation, he could not rely on these 2 skills. At this moment, Yi Xian was sitting in the small battleship, the flying star shuttle. He had set the self-propelling mode so that the flying star shuttle would take him to the Sky River Star in this star field. Yi Xian had already sunk into deep thought. He was thinking about how to use the resources he had at hand to open up the situation as soon as possible. First of all, he had to verify the ownership of the 9 heavens star. This was the most important thing for Yi Xian to do now that he was on his way to the Sky River Star. As for what to do after that, the system suggested that Yi Xian register as an interstellar mercenary while he was on his way to the Sky River Star. He had the title of Interstellar Traveler, which was unique to the system and also an advantage for Yi Xian. In the boundless galaxy, there were all sorts of resources and opportunities. However, during interstellar travel, the chances of encountering spatial rifts were also very high. Compared to other interstellar mercenaries, Yi Xian's title as an interstellar traveler reduced his risk in this aspect to the minimum. However, what truly prompted Yi Xian to accept the system's suggestion and decide to register as an official interstellar mercenary after going to Heavenly River Planet was another matter. That was the acquisition of the interstellar bloodline. There were many kinds of starry sky bloodlines in the devouring system exchange shop, but he only had one, the source of devouring, which was a currency in the system. He couldn't exchange anything good with it. With the starry sky bloodline, one's strength would increase even faster. Therefore, Yi Xian was determined to win. In addition to exchanging from the system, he had another way, which was to obtain the inheritance from some of the ferocious beasts in the starry sky outside the system. This kind of starry sky bloodline obtained from the outside world would also be recognized by the system. After successfully obtaining the inheritance, this bloodline inheritance would also be accepted by the system, and there would be a possibility of growth and advancement in the future. After becoming an interstellar mercenary, Yi Xian would have to enter the vast starry sky to hunt for all kinds of ferocious beast materials or find some minerals. These things could be used to exchange for the source of devouring with the system. In addition to exchanging with the starry sky devouring system in his body, he could also exchange for other items with the organizations on some of the base planets of the Wanluo Federation. For example, there was a special organization in the Alliance's office hall on the Sky River planet that dealt with all these. In addition, in the vast starry sky, in addition to the Alliance's thousands of races, there were many more wild, ferocious beasts. These ferocious beasts were the source of the starry sky bloodline. Of course, there were different types of ferocious beasts, and there were good and bad bloodlines. Generally speaking, even the average ferocious beast's bloodline couldn't be exchanged with just a little source of devouring from the system or the Wanluo Federation. If Yi Xian was rich it wouldn't matter, but now that he was short of money, the best way for him to obtain the bloodline of the Starry Sky bloodline was to go to the Starry Sky and find the ferocious beasts himself. This was very difficult, and the success rate was even lower. However, Yi Xian had overcome many obstacles along the way, so this was not a problem for him. After making up his mind, Yi Xian took advantage of the fact that he hadn't reached the Sky River planet and began to look at the universe star map in the Flying Star Shuttle. After he registered as an interstellar mercenary, he would go to the star region. First of all, the location of the Sky River planet in the vast starry sky. The Sky River planet was located in the third universe, which was occupied by the human race. The human race in the third universe had established the Wanluo Federation with the other races in the universe to fight against the first race in the universe, the Tianji race. There were two camps in the Wanluo Federation. One was technology, and the other was cultivation. The technology camp was led by the Immortal Dynasty, and the cultivation camp was led by the Tenju Heavenly Palace. The Immortal Dynasty and the Tenju Heavenly Palace were two major forces, but each occupied half of the starry sky in the third universe. The Sky River planet was located in the middle of these two forces. In this central mezzanine zone, there was a dark void of the universe. This void was called the domain of the buried meteorites. It was said that the wormholes that led to the first universe and other universes, such as the second, were all in the depths of the domain of the buried meteorites. It was safe to say that once a full-scale war broke out between the first universe and the third universe, the domain of the buried meteorites, where the wormholes were located, would become the front line of the war. A large number of experts from the second universe and other universes, who had formed the Wanluo Federation with the human race, would arrive at the domain of the buried meteorites through wormholes first. Of course, there were no large-scale wars between the races in the various universes at the moment, so the domain of the buried meteorites was still peaceful. However, since the wormholes that connected the several universes were located in the depths of the domain of the buried meteorites, even in peaceful times, this domain of the buried meteorites was the most complicated place. Almost all the experts of the various races in the universe would enter this domain of the buried meteorites. Occasionally, one could even see some Heavenly Legacy race members secretly sneaking in. The reason for this was that the domain of the buried meteorites was actually a graveyard of stars, where countless stars had perished. The domain of the buried meteorites wasn't a black hole, but it was between the normal void and a black hole. It was a kind of gray domain of the universe. Almost all the stars that had entered the period of death had been drawn into this domain of the buried meteorites, just like how a black hole would absorb and devour everything. In fact, this gray domain of the buried meteorites was a black hole that was slowly forming. Since it hadn't formed yet, both the experts of the various races in the universe and the various fierce beasts in the universe could enter it to hunt for the abundant resources inside, as well as the star core origins of those dead stars. Yi Xian was currently at the first grade of the star core realm, which was the lowest level of the starry sky grade. These star core origins would be very useful for his cultivation. While he was deducing, the system's voice rang out again. Ding! We have arrived at the Sky River planet. Chapter 2593. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The owner of the Nine Heavens Starin edition, the Sky River star was not only huge, but it also gave Yi Xian a dreamy feeling. The gigantic celestial body also had an atmosphere that enveloped the celestial body. However, on this atmosphere, one could vaguely see a large number of nodes flashing with light. Clearly, this was both an atmosphere and an array formation. When needed, it had defensive capabilities. This was within the scope of the Cultivation civilization. But in fact, the Sky River Star was not just a planet where the Cultivation civilization flourished, because Xianxia saw several huge star docks outside the atmosphere. They were similar to the docks and ports in the ocean, but they were docked by interstellar battleships. Of course, the interstellar battleships in sight were not small battleships like the Flying Star shuttle owned by Xianxia. They were all supergiants. Right now, these giant interstellar battleships were docked at the star docks opened up in the atmosphere of the Nine-Heaven Star Array, waiting to enter the inner part of the star. Obviously, no one could enter the other areas of the array formation's atmosphere. If they entered by mistake, they might trigger a reaction from the array formation, which would lead to the arrival of patrolling soldiers. Xianxia put away the Flying Star shuttle immediately. The system automatically helped him to create a citizen of the Wan Luo Federation. In fact, there was no such thing as an identity token. Instead, he just needed to use an iris scan to verify his identity. Xianxia landed on one of the star docks. The star docks were very large. A huge platform had been built in the void outside the atmosphere, which was divided into two sides. One side was the dock area. Those large battleships could not enter the Sky River Star, so they could dock at the star docks outside. They had to pay rent. This showed the advantages of using small battleships. They were similar to magic treasures that could be stored inside one's body, and they could save on docking fees. Of course, large battleships could also be stored inside one's body, but that was not something an ordinary starry sky cultivator could do. After Xianxia landed on the platform, he walked straight to the personnel passage on the other side. There were many people queuing up. In addition to ordinary people, there were all kinds of strange life forms. Xianxia even observed one of them secretly for a long time, but he could not find which part of the head was and which part of the butt was. However, the aura emanating from his body was very strong, so he did not dare to examine him too closely for fear of causing unnecessary trouble. The Myriad Luo Federation was obviously very powerful. Whether it was the Cultivation civilization or the technological civilization, they had all developed to an extremely high level. They even had the ability to combine the two. After lining up behind Xianxia, a certain instrument in front of him only flashed with a light. It scanned his eyes and then let him go. After entering the atmosphere, what appeared before them was an even more dreamy world. Since they had already entered the starry era, it was obvious that the buildings on Heavenly River Planet weren't limited to just land. Xianxia saw that there were also tunnels that led to the bottom of the sea in the vast ocean. At the same time, other than the land, there were also some large cities in the sky that were similar to the city in the sky. In the atmosphere of Heavenly River Planet, there were a large number of small shuttles operating. It was a dazzling sight. Although he was very curious and interested, Xianxia did not intend to explore this interstellar city that he had seen for the first time since entering the starry sky. This was because he was now a pauper. He only had a little bit of devouring source, which was used as the currency of the starry sky devouring system. The currency of the Myriad Luo Federation was the star coin, and he did not have a single one. The star coin was actually a kind of crystal. It was the crystal left after the energy of the star core was drained. Although the energy of the star core in these crystals had been depleted, they were still from the core of the star and could slowly absorb the free energy of the universe and store it inside. It could be said that they still had a certain value. Therefore, the residue of the star core was collected by the Myriad Luo Federation and polished into the standard size of a pigeon egg to be used as currency. Of course, the star core was also divided into different grades. After the energy was depleted, the remaining crystals would be of different colors. The darker the color, the faster the speed at which the free energy of the universe was extracted and stored. Therefore, even if they were polished into the same standard shape, their value would be different. They were divided into 7 types: white, orange, cyan, green, red, blue, and purple. 10 white coins were equal to 1 orange coin, 10 orange coins were equal to 1 cyan coin, and so on. In the end, 1 purple coin was equal to 1 million white coins. It was said that there were 2 types of star coins above the purple coin. One was black, and the other was 9-colored. 1 black coin was equal to 10 purple coins, which was 10 million white coins. 1 9-colored coin was equal to 100 purple coins, which was 100 million white coins. Xianxia had decided to enter the graveyard star field as a star mark mercenary. In addition to obtaining the bloodline of the star beasts and hunting materials, his other purpose was to find the star core in the core of the dead star and devour its energy to improve his cultivation. After that, he could recycle the remaining crystals to the myriad Luo Federation and exchange them for star coins. These star coins would be the universal currency of any planet in the myriad Luo Federation in the future. They were indispensable, and the more the better. After entering the atmosphere of the Sky River star, the starlight-level devouring system in his body had automatically connected with the internal network of the planet. This connection was silent and would not be discovered by the core of the planet. This was another advantage that Yi Xian had over the other interstellar masters. Almost as soon as he set foot on the planet, he could use the devouring system in his body to search for information about the services on the planet. Soon, he found the location of the Sky River Federation office. It was a huge building suspended in the air above the vast sea of the Sky River star. Whether it was registering for the star exploration rights, registering as an interstellar mercenary of the myriad Luo Federation, or many other things, everything was done on this platform. There were many figures shuttling back and forth on the platform. Since the Sky River star was located at the periphery of the graveyard star field, the myriad Luo Federation masters, except for the human race, could be seen everywhere. Fortunately, registering as an interstellar mercenary and owning the star exploration rights did not require any star coins. Otherwise, given Yi Xian's current situation of being penniless, he would not have been able to complete either of these two tasks. After a while, Yi Xian lined up in front of two huge windows and completed both of these tasks. As expected of the Star Age, the number of people working at the windows was extraordinary. More than 90% of the staff at the windows were advanced humanoid robots. When Yi Xian exited from the second window, the devouring system in his body beeped. Ding! Congratulations to the host for becoming the owner of the 9 heavenly stars. Hint: as the host's abilities improve, there will be a chance to absorb the 9 heavenly stars into the devouring system in the future. Chapter 2594. Federation Rankings. Hearing the notification from the devouring system, Yi Xian finally realized that the so-called interstellar mercenary status was actually tied to his Federation status. There was no physical token, which made things much more convenient. As for the points function of the virtual soldier ownership token, he hadn't paid much attention to it before. Now that he heard about it, his interest was piqued and he quickly checked the system in his body. The so-called Federation points referred to the contribution points made by the citizens of the Wan Luo Federation to the Federation. It existed for life and could be accumulated. Currently, Yi Xian's Federation points were 0, 0. These were two numbers. The 0 in front was the official point value. It would continue to accumulate and wouldn't clear out. The 0 in the brackets was the value that had already been exchanged. It would accumulate as the points were used. For example, if the value was 1,200, then it meant that you had contributed a total of 1,000 contribution points to the myriad Luo Federation. However, of these 1,000 contribution points, 200 points had already been used up by you. That's right, these contribution points could be used to exchange for items in all the Federation's planets and cities. Every planet's Federation Affairs Office had a special department. It was said that even some heaven-defying materials, treasures, techniques, bloodlines, and the like could be exchanged. Of course, the prerequisite was that you had enough Federation points. This Federation point system wasn't unique to the human race's interstellar mercenaries. Instead, all citizens of the Wan Luo Federation could go to a special window to activate this Federation contribution point system. In addition to the human race, the Wan Luo Federation also had a large number of other races in the universe. This Federation contribution point system was universal. In other words, as long as you had enough points, you could use it whether you were in the human race's territory or the territory of other races in the universe. As long as the other party belonged to the Wan Luo Federation. Of course, in order to activate this Federation contribution point system, you first had to have enough strength. First-order star core was the minimum requirement. Whether it was the human race or the other races in the universe, many citizens didn't have the strength and didn't qualify. That was because the source of this point system was limited to the enemies of the myriad Luo Federation, in other words, the first Cosmos Heavenly Legacy race. Only when you exterminated a member of the Heavens Legacy race or their subordinate race, or when you obtained special materials or minerals that were extremely important to the battle between the Federation and the Heavens Legacy race, would the system automatically give you points. Of course, each method had a different standard of scoring. If you killed an official member of the Heavens Legacy race, you might get 100 federal contribution points, but if you killed an existence of a slave race that was a vassal of the Heavens Legacy race, you might only get 10 or 1 points. Similarly, if you only obtained a piece of special ore and handed it over to the Federation Affairs Office, The contribution points awarded could be as high as 1,000 or even 10,000 points. Since there was a Federation contribution point system, there would naturally be a contribution point ranking. This virtual Federation contribution point ranking could be found on any terminal of the myriad Luo Federation's member races. Yi Xian checked it out and was immediately shocked. This Federation contribution point ranking was divided into 3 categories: the Sky ranking, the Earth ranking, and the Human ranking. The Sky ranking was based on the 1st to 100th place with the highest contribution points. The Earth ranking was based on the 101st to the 1,000th place. The Human ranking was based on the 101st to the 1,000th place. It was needless to say how many people there were in the second cosmos, but there were also other races in the other cosmos. This base number was simply unbelievable. However, the Sky, Earth, and Human rankings only had a total of 10,000 people. These 10,000 people had not changed much in the past several hundred years. Those who could make it to the Sky ranking were the most elite members of the Federation. It was easy to imagine how difficult it would be for the latecomers to replace them. Yi Xian looked at the last few people on the Human ranking. All of them had more than 100,000 contribution points, and their cultivation levels were all above the Black Hole realm. As for the 900 people on the Earth ranking, their cultivation levels were all question marks. As for the 100 people on the Sky ranking, their cultivation levels were also all question marks. This was obviously a deliberate cover-up. In the starry sky environment, the cultivation levels were very different. Many people could not see through all the cultivation levels. However, Yi Xian, thanks to the devouring system in his body, was able to see through all this even though he was the weakest core realm. However, even if it was the devouring system, in terms of starry sky level cultivation, Yi Xian was still the first few that had been unsealed. They were core realm, meteor, satellite, planet, star, nebula, galaxy, and black hole. It was said that these were only the top 8 out of the 15 normal starry sky realms. After the 15 normal starry sky realms, it was said that there were some advanced starry sky realms who could really be considered strong in the starry sky. However, Yi Xian knew nothing about this at the moment. At this moment, he was the weakest first-order core star state expert among the 8 known star state experts. The weakest star state experts on the ranking list of young masters were all in the black hole state. It was safe to say that he was still a long way away from reaching the ranking list. Of course, the criteria for getting on the Federation contribution list was only based on the number of contribution points the Federation had. It had nothing to do with one's strength. However, if one wanted to obtain a large number of contribution points, would it be possible without a corresponding strength? Even Yi Xian had not thought about this. Neither had the AI robot who registered him as an interstellar mercenary. She definitely did not realize that not long after, the first Federation powerhouse to get on the Human ranking list with a cultivation level below the black hole realm had already been born in her hands. This interstellar mercenary's serial number was easy to remember. The 13148080. After taking care of the 2 urgent matters at hand, Yi Xian did not stay on the Sky River planet any longer. He immediately returned to the vast void outside the Sky River planet's atmosphere through the Star Docks portal. The devouring system in his body had automatically downloaded a star map of the graveyard star field. Although the Sky River planet was located in the graveyard star field, it was at the outermost edge. If he wanted to explore the star field and obtain materials from the dire beasts and various useful minerals, he would have to go deeper. Yi Xian took out the flying star shuttle and immediately rushed into the boundless gray void in front of him. A whole month passed by quickly. At first, the flying star shuttle could occasionally see a few battleships passing by in the void. However, in the past 10 days or so, he had not seen any life forms. Not to mention battleships, he had not even seen a single dire beast, which was said to be the most common in this vast and boundless graveyard star field. Just as Yi Xian was speechless, the system's notification finally sounded again. Chapter 2595. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. What a double loss. Bloodline. Elementary. Value rare. Yi Xian's heart skipped a beat when he heard this. He was overjoyed. The elementary bloodline meant that this ferocious beast was most likely still in its infancy. If Yi Xian could capture it and use the devouring system to devour it, the bloodline he would obtain would be extremely complete. Value. Rare meant that this ferocious beast's bloodline was the type that could continue to grow. The 2 words rare were enough to show how rare this ferocious beast was. Of course, What surprised Yi Xian even more was that this ferocious beast was actually the Star Devourer, or Star Beast for short. In the vast universe there were thousands of races. Many of them weren't even fleshly life forms. For example, Yi Xian had learned from the devouring system that there was a mineral life form whose true form was actually a mysterious crystal. However, even this fleshly crystal life form was actually a member of the Myriad Federation. On the contrary, many of the ferocious beasts in the universe with flesh and blood were excluded from the Federation. No matter how strong they were just prey. The most fundamental reason for this was intelligence. The only standard to distinguish and measure the ferocious beasts in the universe was intelligence. Even a crystal life form could be considered a higher life form as long as its intelligence was developed to a certain standard. However, the ferocious beasts, no matter how strong they were, had limited intelligence and could only be hunted down by higher life forms. In the vast universe, there were countless types of ferocious beasts with incomplete intelligence. The Star Devourer was one of the more precious ferocious beasts, especially in the domain of the buried meteorites. To put it bluntly, the domain of the buried meteorites was a huge black hole that was forming in the universe. A large number of stars were being pulled into this special star field that was heading toward destruction. Furthermore, even a star that was emitting light and heat would be affected by the general trend of this vast star field after it was pulled into the domain of the buried meteorites. It would rapidly dim and begin to die. This kind of star wasn't like the stars in the outer space. They didn't have the terrifying light and heat that people couldn't get close to. However, they weren't really dead stars. Because they were affected by the general situation of this star area, they dimmed quickly in a short time. Deep inside their cores, there was still a large amount of star core origin. Therefore it would have great value. Moreover, it would be very convenient and fast to excavate this value. There were many such stars in the domain of the buried domain. That was why this wondrous domain had attracted so many powerful experts from the Federation. Even powerful experts from the Heavenly Fortune race's subordinate races would secretly come to this place, along with powerful experts from the Heavenly Fortune race's subordinate races. However, most of the stars in the domain of the buried falling were dead stars whose cores had already been drained of the origin of star. These dead stars were the same as the other valuable stars. If one didn't go deep into the core of the star, they wouldn't know how much star core essence was left in the star core, or rather, whether it still existed. However, if he were to attempt to enter the depths of the core of every star he encountered, it would be extremely tiring. However, the Star Devourer's bloodlines could solve this problem. The reason why the Space Devourer beasts were called star beasts was because they fed on the star core origin of stars throughout their lives. Every Space Devourer beast had to consume a large amount of star core origin in order to evolve their bloodline and grow their bodies. Therefore, they were very sensitive to the aura of star core essence. Like sharks in the sea, they were especially sensitive to the smell of blood. It was safe to say that if he could raise a star beast or possess a star beast's bloodline, he would have a much easier time searching for the origin of star cores in the domain of the graveyard of the domain of the falling stars. It was definitely more efficient than getting twice the result with half the effort. Star core essence had many uses and was very valuable. For ordinary experts of the Federation, they could either trade it for other items or absorb its energy. Then they could return the star core essence that had been drained of its energy to the Myriad Federation so that they could polish it into standard forms and use it as the Federation's currency. Yi Xian was currently at the star core state. When he was at the star core state, devouring star core essence was the most helpful for improving his cultivation base. The speed at which he improved his cultivation base was the fastest, much faster than any other kind of energy. In other words, what Yi Xian needed the most right now was star core essence, and this Star Devourer was obviously a large amount of star core essence right in front of him. Star Devourers were very rare to begin with, and a young one was even rarer. This time, Yi Xian couldn't miss it no matter what. Lock on. Hunt immediately. Yi Xian didn't hesitate in the slightest and immediately replied. Soon, a red dot appeared on the system's star chart. It wasn't very far from Yi Xian's current position, and the system couldn't detect it even if it was too far away. With a specific direction, Yi Xian immediately activated the flying star shuttle and rushed over as fast as he could. This kind of star devourer was something that could only be encountered by chance. It could only be said that he was lucky to have encountered it. Just in case, he had to hunt it as soon as possible. Fortunately, it was only a young beast, so it shouldn't be very strong. Yi Xian used the system's devouring hand, so his chances of successfully hunting it were still very high. If it really didn't work, he still had the devouring hand, but his chances of success were slightly lower. If the devouring hand couldn't capture it, it meant that the beast was obviously very strong. Even if he tried to forcibly devour it, it would be a little difficult. Soon, a green ferocious beast about 10 feet in size appeared in front of him. Its aura was very restrained, and it was floating in the void of the galaxy. In front of it was a small pile of red crystals. Star core essence? Seeing this pile of red crystals, Yi Xian's pupils shrank, and his heart trembled. The currency of the Wan Luo Federation, star coins, was made from the remaining crystals of star core essence that had been depleted of energy. They were divided into 7 colors: white, orange, cyan, green, red, blue, and purple. The star coins made from red star core essence were also red in color. 1 star core essence was equivalent to 10,000 white coins. The volume of a star coin was only the size of a thumb, but the small pile of red star core essence in front of him, even if the consumption during the polishing process was taken into account, could be made into at least 10,000 red star coins. This was 100 million white coins, the same value as 10 black coins, or 1 9-colored coin. But this was not the most important thing. What was more important was that this pile of red star core essence clearly still contained the energy of the star core essence. Otherwise, this star devourer wouldn't have taken an interest in it and carefully approached it step by step. Bait. This word flashed in Yi Xian's mind, and a strange expression appeared on his face. Who was so generous that they didn't hesitate to use so many red star core essences to lure this star devourer beast? Encountering Yi Xian, this was clearly a situation where they were about to lose the bait after the bait. Chapter 2596. Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations Escape, Devouring Hand. Amidst his shock, Yi Xian's heart wildly jumped. However, he didn't hesitate in the slightest as he directly activated the devouring hand and swallowed the starry sky devouring beast and the small pile of red star cores into his body. Then, he turned around and fled without looking back. No matter how far away the astral devouring beast was, its attention would definitely be on him. The moment Yi Xian made his move, the other party would know. He had to escape immediately. What? Someone in the Wan Luo Federation dares to steal from me? This is outrageous. Almost at the same time Yi Xian made his move, a young man in a warship exclaimed in disbelief. Then, in the empty void in the distance, a small warship slowly appeared. Although the size of this warship was not large, about the same as Yi Xian's flying star shuttle, its grade was obviously much higher. This could be seen from the fact that the warship's hull had a concealment array. In the Star Age, the technological civilization and the cultivation civilization were neck and neck. Most of the time, there was no distinction between them. Even warships were the same. This kind of top-notch product of the technological civilization had long applied the arrays of the cultivation civilization. The arrays engraved on the inside and outside of the warship were generally used in 3 ways: attack, defense, or speed. Although it wasn't that there weren't any warships that were specially branded with such concealment arrays, they were generally important warships of the Federation. There was only one explanation for a private warship to be branded with such an array: too many star coins. Obviously, the young man who owned this small battleship must have an extraordinary background. Otherwise, he wouldn't have said those words earlier, and he wouldn't have casually tossed out a pile of red-grade star core origins to capture a young star devourer. But now, all of this had been taken advantage of by Yi Xian. In fact, before he made his move, Yi Xian had already foreseen the consequences. But even so, even if he had to do it all over again, he would still make the same choice. Cultivation was originally a struggle against the heavens. There weren't many chances for a pie to fall from the sky. If he didn't properly grasp it, even Yi Xian himself would feel that he was a failure. No matter who you are, this young master will definitely pull out your tendons and skin you alive. You won't be able to escape. When he heard the angry roar behind him, Yi Xian subconsciously turned around to take a look. Only then did he discover that in the empty void, a battleship had appeared out of nowhere. The oval-shaped light shield on the surface of the battleship was actually flashing with the light of array patterns. This was clearly a high-grade battleship engraved with array patterns. Even the flying star shuttle that the devouring system gave to Yi Xian as a gift did not have any runes on it. However, the flying star shuttle's unique feature was its speed. Although it could not be compared with higher-grade warships, there were very few warships of the same grade that could surpass it in terms of speed. After all, he had just entered the starry sky. In order to protect the host, the devouring system would not be stingy with escaping items. Damn it! You can't get away. Seeing that Xian had summoned the flying star shuttle and dashed into the depths of the graveyard in a streak of brightness, the young man in the small battleship behind him gnashed his teeth in fury. His face twisted hideously. He boosted the battleship with all his strength and chased after him. He had a lot of battleships. He even had the strategic-level giant starships. He also had several battleships of each type that had been engraved with arrays in terms of speed, defense, attack, and so on. As it happened, in order to capture the Space Devourer, the only battleship he had brought with him was the Hidden Dust warship that had been specially enhanced with a top-level concealment array. Even the sensitive senses of the ferocious beasts could not detect the slightest trace of the Hidden Dust warship. The small, inconspicuous battleship of the young man, on the other hand, was as fast as his Hidden Dust warship that had been engraved with arrays despite its old-fashioned appearance. As the two of them were chasing each other, the distance between them could not be shortened at all. The situation infuriated the young man in the Hidden Dust warship. He roared from time to time, and the killing intent in his heart had reached its peak. The two battleships, one in front and one behind, soon rushed into the depths of the graveyard and went deeper and deeper. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. The first 2 days were fine. The distance between the two battleships barely changed. But on the third day, Xian clearly noticed that the battleship behind him was getting closer and closer. The enemy had used some unknown method to significantly increase the speed of his battleship. If this continued, the flying star shuttle would be caught within 3 days at most. Xian's strength was currently at the first level of the Star Core realm. In the Starry Sky realm, he belonged to the lowest level. He didn't think that the guy chasing after him was the same as him, belonging to the lowest level of cultivation. In other words, once the enemy caught up with him, Xian would be faced with a real life-or-death crisis. Faster, faster. Under the threat of life and death, Xian could be said to be extremely nervous. He even started to mutter to himself. He was urging the devouring system in his body to hurry up. From the moment the devourer of stars was hunted down, the devouring system in Xian's body had started to extract and devour the beast's bloodline. This process was obviously very long. 3 days had passed, and it was still not over. This process consumed the system's energy, so Xian could not spare time to absorb the small pile of red-level core energies. That was why he was so anxious. Since it seemed that he could not escape, the most important thing for Xian now was to improve his strength as much as possible. Even if it was only from the first level to the second level of the Star Core, for him, Xian's chances of survival would greatly increase in the upcoming battle with the pursuers from the battleship behind him. Just as Xian was feeling anxious, the devouring system in his body finally completed the purification of the bloodline of the infant devourer of stars. Xian heard the familiar system prompt in his head. Ding! Congratulations to the host. You have obtained the precious Great Devourer of Stars bloodline. Do you wish to absorb it? Without hesitation, Xian immediately responded, absorb it immediately. Ding! Congratulations to the host. You have obtained the precious Great Devourer of Stars bloodline. Grade. Primary. This bloodline belongs to the growth-type bloodline. Evolution requirement. Devour the bloodline of the same kind of devourer of stars and continuously purify the bloodline to increase its grade. Bloodline specialty. Extremely sensitive to the aura of core energies. Within a certain range, it can sense the aura of all core energies. Sensing range. Increases with the bloodline grade. Ding! Congratulations to the host. You have completed the fusion of the precious Great Devourer of Stars bloodline. Chapter 2597. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Terrifying Star Beast Bloodline. It was obvious that the red star core origin that the system had sensed was actually the small pile of star core origin that Xian had absorbed when he had absorbed the Star Devourer Star Beast. Star core origin was the main source of energy used to increase one's strength after breaking through to the Starry Sky grade. However, the effect might not be as good later on. If one wanted to advance, they would need better things. However, for Xian, who was at the lowest level of the Star Core grade, the effect of the Star Core origin was definitely the best. If there really was something good, given his current strength, he would definitely be able to devour it because of the devouring system. However, the efficiency of the absorption and utilization would obviously be greatly reduced. This reduction did not refer to the effect, but to the speed at which it would take effect. However, for Xian, who was currently in danger, advancing immediately was exactly what he needed. The faster the better. The battleship behind them was getting closer and closer. Therefore, Xian did not hesitate at all. He immediately issued an order to the system. Absorb now, full speed. Ding. Red star core origin discovered. Absorbing now. Progress 1. Progress 30. Ding. Congratulations to the host. Realm level increased. Current realm. Level 2 star core grade. Absorbing red star core origin. Progress 50. Progress 70. Ding. Congratulations to the host. Realm level increased. Current realm. Level 3 star core grade. Ding. Absorption of red star core origin completed. As the notification of the devouring system rang in his mind, Xian was pleasantly surprised. Although he had been certain that this small pile of red star core origin would be able to successfully advance his realm, even Xian had not expected that this small pile of red star core origin would contain so much energy that it would allow him to advance his realm level twice in a row. In just a short span of 10 breaths, his cultivation had advanced from level 1 star core grade to level 3 star core grade. Although he'd only just entered the 3rd level of the star core, the incomparably powerful feeling that Xian had captured from within his body caused him to suddenly feel as if he'd been reborn. It was simply too wonderful. To cultivators, the advancement of their cultivation, even if it was just a small advancement, was like entering a whole new world. Moreover, the refreshing feeling of making successive breakthroughs in a short period of 10 breaths and advancing 2 small levels in one go was something that couldn't be described with words unless one experienced it personally. It could be said that the current Xian felt like a completely new person. His self-confidence was firmer than ever. However, this was only the beginning. The real surprise was still to come. Just as Xian was rejoicing over the successive breakthroughs in his cultivation, the notification from the devouring system that had just stopped ringing in his mind suddenly rang out once more. Ding! Space Devouring Beast Bloodline activated. The bloodlines are fusing. Congratulations to the host for perfectly integrating the Starry Sky Devouring Beast bloodline. Ding! Bloodline talent activated. He had caught the aura of the Star Core origin. Position. Front right. Grade. Cyan. Medium. Quantity. Federation's measurement method, 1 square meter. Ding! Captured the aura of the Star Core origin. Position. Straight ahead. Grade, orange, high. Quantity. Federation's measurement method, 2. 5 square meters. Ding! Captured the aura of the Star Core origin. Position. Front left. Grade, green, low. Quantity. Federation's measurement method, 0. 3 square meters. Ding! Capture the aura of the Star Core origin. After the bloodline of the Star Devouring Beast was extracted by the devouring system and successfully integrated into Xian's body, the devouring system automatically activated the bloodline talent of the Star Core origin that Xian had just fused with. It immediately captured a large amount of aura of the Star Core origin from the vast expanse of space around them. Following that, the monotonous and mechanical notification continuously rang out in Xian's mind. All of this happened so suddenly that Xian was caught off guard. It was as if he had fallen into a dream. As far as the eye could see, he could see a large number of stars through the porthole of the flying star shuttle. These stars were of various sizes, but without exception, they were all dim and lifeless. Even if one used their divine sense to explore and sweep through them, they would not be able to detect any difference between them. It was obvious that some of these stars still had some star core origins in their inner star cores. However, most of the star core origin in the center of these stars had already been depleted. The only way for ordinary cultivators to collect this kind of star core origin was to break through the surface of these stars and go all the way to the center of the star. At that time, they would either obtain some star core origin that still contained energy or a small pile of depleted star core origin that could only be recycled to the Wan Luo Federation and turned into raw materials for the Federation's standard star coins. If the star core origin crystals were above the red level, they would still be of some value. However, if the star core origin crystals were below the red level, their value would not be enough to make up for the energy required to go from the surface of the star to the center of the star. It was simply not enough to make ends meet. But now, Xian didn't need to get close to these stars at all. Within a certain range, he only needed to activate the bloodline of the Universe Devourer that he had just fused with. The effect was as if he had activated an ultimate detection radar that specifically targeted the star core origin. Not only could he instantly determine whether the star core origin still contained energy in the center of a star, but he could also determine the quality and quantity of the star core origin. In this case, Xianxia could choose to excavate the star core origin based on the data he had obtained. He could give up on the star core origin crystals that were too few in quantity or quality. He would only choose the star cores that were of high quality and abundant. In this sense, the bloodline talent of the Universe Devourer, which was its sensitive detection ability for the star core origin crystals, was simply terrifying. With this bloodline, Xianxia could obtain as many star core origins as he wanted. With this bloodline, Xianxia's cultivation level would undoubtedly soar like a rocket, of course. All of this was based on the premise that Xianxia could successfully shake off the tail that had been following him closely for the past 3 days. Or rather, he could directly kill the tail. Otherwise, even if he was pleasantly surprised to find a star with a large amount of purple star core origin crystals, he could only sigh helplessly. He would not be able to obtain the star core origin crystals even if he wanted to. When he realized this, a murderous glint flashed across Xianxia's eyes. After gritting his teeth, he immediately stopped the flying star shuttle. Chapter 2598. Translator, Transin Editor. Transin forceful devour. As the flying star shuttle came to a stop, Xianxia stepped out of the battleship and put the shuttle away with a wave of his hand. At this moment, he was standing in the void of the Milky Way without any concealment. He was expressionless as he faced the small battleship that was chasing after him at high speed. Seeing that Xianxia did not intend to run anymore, the small battleship behind him slowed down. Then, with a flash of light, an elegant man in a moon-white robe appeared in the void of the Milky Way. However, in order to prevent any tricks, this person did not put away the small battleship that was enchanted with a concealment formation. This person had a red face and white teeth. His appearance seemed to be quite extraordinary, but the light in his eyes was obviously a little erratic. Coupled with his pale complexion, there was a hint of sickness. With a single glance, it was obvious that his body had been hollowed out by wine and women. Because of this, his cultivation was not very high. He was only at the 4th order core realm, which was the same as Xianxia, but 1 order higher. Judging from the fact that this person was able to own such a small warship that was engraved with a concealment formation and a small pile of red-level star core origins, this kind of extravagance indicated that his identity and origin were obviously extraordinary. Perhaps it was because of this reason that, with his identity as a young master, he naturally had no interest in cultivation. Being able to reach the 4th order core realm at such a young age was probably due to the accumulation of all kinds of treasures. Although the opponent's cultivation was 1 order higher, Xianxia secretly sighed in relief after seeing this. It was only 1 order higher. How could a flower in a greenhouse like this fill the gap between him and Xianxia, an expert who had grown up killing all the way? If the opponent was 1 order higher, Xianxia would probably turn around and run for his life. However, it was only 1 order higher than him. It was really negligible. Unfortunately, the opponent obviously did not have this kind of awareness. At this moment, after his figure appeared, he briefly checked Xianxia's cultivation aura. A disdainful sneer appeared on his pale face. No wonder you suddenly stopped without fear. It turns out that you hid your cultivation. Unfortunately, you are only at the 3rd order core realm. You will still die if you encounter this young master. Speaking of this, the white-robed man's face suddenly sank. He scolded sternly. You are really the first person in the Wan Luo Federation who dares to steal from this young master. Seeing that you are courageous in seeking death, hand over the devouring space beast and this young master will give you a complete corpse. In other words, what the opponent was clearly only devouring star was devouring realm core. As for the small pile of red order core origin, he did not even mention it. Was way. Obviously, he did not care. Sure enough, he was rich. Xianxia secretly sighed, then spread out his hands, his face full of helplessness. To be honest, that devouring star has been used up by me, including that pile of red order core origin. If I want to return it, I will definitely not be able to. What? Used it? You didn't treat it as meat, did you? Damn it! Do you know how precious a young space-devouring beast is? This young master searched half of the Wan Luo Federation, and only accidentally found one. After following it for 2 whole years, you actually treated it as meat? The white-robed man was furious. his eyes bursting with killing intent. After roaring a few words, he immediately reacted. No! That pile of red order core origin contains a huge amount of energy. Even this young master can't absorb it all in a short period of time. How can you do it in just 3 days? You are lying. It's up to you to believe it or not. Anyway, I really can't return it. Also, I didn't know that they had an owner. At most, I will return it to you in the future. Yi Xian's face once again showed a helpless expression. He frowned slightly, showing a hint of impatience. You dare to trick me? The white-robed man was furious and suddenly roared. You are courting death. Meteor sword. Slash. Xiao. A red brilliance flashed. As the white-robed man roared, the red brilliance expanded in the wind, instantly turning into a wide broadsword the size of a door. With a strong pressure, it was as fast as a meteor, slashing toward Yi Xian. The latter's eyelids twitched wildly. This white-robed man's attack was indeed extraordinary. The red broadsword's level was obviously not low. With Yi Xian's current core origin cultivation, there was no way he could defend against it. It was impossible for him to even turn around and escape. No matter how fast he could not be faster than this red broadsword that was not low level. Danger instantly descended. For Yi Xian, the only solution now was Devouring Hand. Without any hesitation, Yi Xian immediately activated the Devouring System's Devouring Hand skill. In an instant, a huge phantom palm appeared and grabbed at the red broadsword that was slashing toward him. Rip! In the next instant, a slight sound like silk being torn was heard. The phantom palm was actually split open by the red broadsword. Its momentum was unstoppable, and it was still whistling toward Yi Xian. Yi Xian's expression froze. As expected, its level was not low. It was beyond the range of the Devouring Hand. If that was the case, he could only try by force. Gritting his teeth, Yi Xian quickly said in his mind, Devouring System, forcibly collect. Xiao. The sound of something breaking through the air was heard. The phantom palm that was split open by the red broadsword spun around. The originally split palm closed as it spun, and it seemed to become more solid. Then, it reached out and grabbed at the red broadsword as if it was taking something out of a bag. It wrapped around the red broadsword and entered Yi Xian's body. After a forceful attempt, Yi Xian finally succeeded. However, the price that Yi Xian paid was not small. He felt that the devouring system in his body was being consumed. What? You actually took this young master's meteor sword? What kind of method is this? The white-robed man was shocked. His eyes were wide open, and his face was full of disbelief. As he spoke, he suddenly gritted his teeth and raised his hand again. You took this young master's magic weapon, so this young master will take you. Demon refining pot. Take. Rumble. The sound of rolling thunder suddenly erupted without any warning. With a wave of the white-robed man's hand, a green light shot out from his palm and turned into a simple and unadorned long-mouth flat pot. It seemed to be filled with endless thunder. The rumbling sound came from this long-mouth flat pot. A heart-palpitating pressure spread out, instantly enveloping a large area of the Star River void. The level of this magic weapon was actually higher than the red broadsword from before. As soon as it appeared, it gave him a feeling of fear and trepidation. It was also at this time that the white-robed man's sneer came again. This pot is called demon refining. It can absorb all things in the world. Even if one's cultivation is high enough, it can also absorb stars. Although this young master has not refined it yet, it is easy for this young master to take a little ant like you. Not refined yet? Chapter 2599. Translator, Transin Editor. Transin A huge gain. Since it had not been refined, it was equivalent to an item without an owner. No matter how high the grade of the devil refining pot was, it would be easier for the devouring hand to collect it than the red broadsword. As this thought flashed through his mind, Yi Xian no longer hesitated. He raised his hand and roared, Devouring Hand! Heavenly Star Sword! Slash! The huge illusory palm shadow appeared again. This time, Yi Xian did not activate the forcible collection ability, but he still easily collected the devil refining pot. The powerful pressure in the galaxy was instantly gone, and even the rumbling of thunder completely disappeared. In addition, the huge illusory palm shadow, under the control of Yi Xian, took the opportunity to grab the small warship that had not been collected by the white-robed man. When it was successfully collected, the heavenly star sword that was shot out turned into a ray of light. After circling one round, it suddenly slashed at the back of the white-robed man's neck. What? This is impossible. The white-robed man's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. His face was full of shock. In the end, he stomped his feet and roared in the air. You are definitely not a third-order planetary core warrior. Damn it, you actually concealed your cultivation. Liar. Bandit. Give me back my devouring beast, give me back my meteor sword, give me back my devil refining pot. Heavens, and this young master's dust concealment warship, you damn bandit. He did not know, but after calculating, the white-robed man realized that he had unknowingly been robbed of many good things by the other party. With his status in the Wanluo Federation, especially in the human race, he had always been the one who took a fancy to other people's things. Then, he would either forcibly take them or scheme to extort them. When had he ever been robbed like this? Monstrous anger surged in his heart. At this moment, the white-robed man went berserk. He completely ignored the heavenly star sword that was slashing at his neck. It was as if he did not feel it at all. It was naturally impossible that he did not feel it. The reason why he did not pay attention to it was because his entire mind was shrouded by a monstrous anger. He did not have time to care about anything else. On the other hand, it was because the aura and power of the heavenly star sword that he felt could not shake him at all. There was no need to pay attention to it at all. With his status, he naturally had no lack of powerful defensive treasures. The white-robed man wasn't alone in his search for the Star Devourer in the domain of the buried meteorite. He had even brought a huge fleet of guards with him. However, he had left the fleet by himself a few months ago. While searching for the Star Devourer, he had accidentally discovered the Star Devourer that he had been tracking for 2 years. Fearing that the Star Devourer would escape, he decided to track it down alone. However, even though he came in a hurry and did not bring many treasures with him, there were a few defensive treasures that he never left his body. As the heavenly star sword slashed down, one of the defensive treasures in the white-robed man's body was automatically activated, releasing a layer of glazed light that completely covered his body. Ding! The heavenly star sword made a crisp sound when it hit the glazed light shield. Not only did it not shake it at all, but the colorful light of the glazed light shield didn't even ripple. Yi Xian's expression instantly darkened. With the other party's previous actions, he probably had quite a few defensive treasures on him as well. Now that he had casually activated one of them, he was already at a loss for what to do. From the looks of it, it was impossible to kill this person today. Since there was no hope to kill him and he had gained a lot of benefits, it was time to escape. This man's small battleship had been taken away by Yi Xian with the Devourer's hand. He should not be able to catch up with him. Yi Xian glanced at his opponent coldly and put away the heavenly star sword. Without saying anything, he activated the flying star shuttle and turned around to leave. Liar! Robber! This young master will not let you go. Behind him, the white-robed man's roar of grief and indignation could be faintly heard. However, he didn't take out another battleship to chase after Yi Xian. Obviously, this man didn't have any other small battleships. Facing Yi Xian, who had activated the flying star shuttle and left, he could only sigh. With a flash of light, the flying star shuttle cut through the void and disappeared into the distance in the blink of an eye. This young master will remember your face. I will not let you go. In the Wanluo Federation, especially in the human race, no one has ever dared to treat me like this. With a touch of madness and coldness in his eyes, the white-robed man turned around and dashed in a certain direction. His guard fleet was not far ahead. Even if he traveled through the void with his physical body, it would take him at most 2 or 3 months to meet up with them. At that time, he would use the power of the entire fleet to search for that robber. Even if he had to turn the entire graveyard domain upside down, he would find that damn robber. One day later, in the depths of the graveyard domain, Yi Xian controlled the flying star shuttle to land on an enormous planet in front of him. He decided to stay here for a while. On the one hand, he wanted to clean up his harvest. On the other hand, when he was approaching this enormous planet, the bloodline talent of the Star Devourer beast had given him a hint that there was not only a considerable amount of red-grade star core origin in the core of this planet. There was even a small amount of blue-grade star core origin that was half a foot long. Putting aside the black and 9-colored star core origin, among the 7 types of star core origin, white, orange, green, red, blue, and violet, the red-grade star core origin was already of the highest quality, and the blue-grade star core origin was only below the violet grade. Even if it was only a small amount of star core origin, Yi Xian wouldn't miss it easily. Not to mention that there was also a large amount of red-grade star core origin that was half a foot long mixed with a small amount of blue-grade star core origin. Anyone would be tempted by such a fortune. After putting away the flying star shuttle, Yi Xian found a large valley on the backside of this enormous planet. After setting up a restrictive formation, he started to clean up his harvest. In addition to the starry sky devourer and a small pile of red-level planetary core origins, he also obtained a small battleship named Hidden Dust, an offensive magic weapon, the red broadsword, and the Lianyao flask that could make thunder roar. The pot was named Demon Purification Pot. According to the words of the white-robed man, it must be a space-type magical treasure that contained a certain amount of space. Not only could it be used to store things, but it could also take living things into it and refine them. As for the thunderous noises it made when it was activated, it meant that in addition to the above-mentioned auxiliary functions, it was also a multifunctional magical treasure that could be used to attack. It was really a rare treasure. Right now, Yi Xian's cultivation was limited. If he wanted to survive in this strange domain of the fallen stars, he would have to rely on magical treasures and other external forces. Therefore, he decided to refine all of the treasures he had obtained and turn them into a part of his overall battle prowess as soon as possible. Chapter 2600. Translator, Transin Editor. Transin activating the fusion system, ding. Congratulations to host. Discovered star core source. Do you wish to collect it? Ding. Congratulations to host. Discovered 9 heavens star essence. Do you wish to activate the fusion system? The star core source was not surprising. That white-robed man could casually throw out a small pile of red-grade star core source to lure the devourer of stars. It would be strange if he did not have other star core source in stock in his concealment warship. But what was this 9 heavens star essence? Could it be that it was also found in the concealment warship? This was not surprising. With the other party's wealth, his status was obviously not ordinary. He was most likely a descendant of one of the core leaders of the human race in the Wanluo Federation. Since that was the case, it was natural for him to have something as good as the 9 heavens star essence that even Yi Xian had never heard of. But this item could actually activate the fusion system of the Devourer system. This was definitely a good item. Although the fusion system had not been activated yet and the system was waiting for Yi Xian's reply, he was not very clear about the specific functions of the system. But just the word fusion was enough to make one's imagination run wild. Yi Xian did not hesitate and immediately ordered the Devourer system to devour the 9 heavens star essence. At the same time, he immediately ordered the fusion system to be activated. As for the star core source that the system had given in the concealment warship, Yi Xian checked it and found that there were not many of them. Moreover, they were all green and green grade 3 or 4 star core source. They were much worse than the grade 5 red grade star core source. It seemed that even the white-robed man did not have many level 5 red planetary core origins. Or rather, he did not have many with him. Previously, in order to trap the starry sky devourer, he had taken out all the level 5 red planetary core origins he had. Of course, in the end, it was still Yi Xian who benefited. Ding! Congratulations to host. The fusion system has been activated. Ding! Discovered treasures that can be fused. Flying Star Shuttle and Concealment Warship, Star Sword and Meteor Sword. Do you wish to fuse them? As the Devourer system's prompt sounded in his mind, Yi Xian was completely stunned. Then, a huge sense of surprise quietly rose in his heart. Treasures of the same type could fuse with each other? There was no doubt about it. After all, the system had already given him a specific notification. He now had a total of 4 items that he could fuse with. In other words, these 4 treasures could be fused into 2 items. They were the Flying Star Shuttle, the Concealment Ship, the Heavenly Star Sword, and the Meteor Sword, which was the red broadsword. The former belonged to the category of small warships, while the latter belonged to the category of sword-type magical equipment. Previously, Yi Xian had been worried that the white-robed man would not have a chance to use this rare warship that was engraved with a concealment array, given his status and position in the myriad Luo Federation, especially among the human race. This was because once he took it out, his identity would definitely be exposed. Now that he had the fusion system, this problem was obviously solved. Regardless of whether it was the Flying Star Shuttle and the Concealment Ship, or the Heavenly Star Sword and the Meteor Sword, after the fusion, they would not be the same as before. In this way, Even if Yi Xian took them out and used them at will, he would not be afraid of being recognized immediately. After some consideration, Yi Xian immediately issued the command to confirm the fusion to the system. He originally thought that after he confirmed the fusion, the Devourer system would quickly and successfully fuse the 2 warships and the 2 sword-type attack magical equipment. Who would have thought that the result would disappoint Yi Xian? Ding! Fusion confirmed. Ding! Discovered green level 3 star core origin, absorbing. Ding! Discovered green level 4 star core origin, absorbing. Ding! Warning! Insufficient fusion energy. Please provide more. Yi Xian was suddenly stunned. Then, he checked the 2 small piles of green and green star core origin in the concealment ship. As expected, he found that the energy inside had disappeared. It was obvious that the Devourer system had automatically absorbed it. Now, they were only 2 small piles of green and green star core crystals respectively. At most, they would be recycled to the Hall of Affairs of the Wan Luo Federation in exchange for some standard star coins. In other words, this newly activated fusion system required energy for every fusion. This energy could be from other resources, but the star core origin was also a type that could be used. However, only a small pile of level 3 green and level 4 green star core origin was obviously not enough to support 2 fusions. More energy was needed. Yi Xian immediately thought of the treasure in the depths of the huge planet under his feet. A small pile of level 6 blue star core origin that was half a foot in size. A small pile of level 5 red star core origin that was 1 foot in size. These were level 5 and level 6 high-grade goods. It should be enough, right? If that was not enough, then this newly activated fusion system would be too disappointing. Just fusing the flying star shuttle and the concealment ship required such a huge amount of fusion energy. What about in the future? When Yi Xian grew up and needed to fuse higher-grade treasures, wouldn't he be at a loss? No matter what, he would first obtain the level 5 and level 6 high-grade star core origin and hand it over to the system to try it out. This planet was huge. From the surface all the way to the core of the planet, one would need to break through all the obstacles along the way. In fact, it was not an easy task. However, Yi Xian clearly knew that there was indeed a star core origin in the planet's core. Furthermore, it was a high-quality level 5 red and level 6 blue star core origin. No matter how difficult the excavation process was, he would definitely not be lacking in motivation. Immediately, he leaped into the deepest part of the abyss and took out the heavenly star sword. He spun it in front of him at an extremely fast speed, turning it into a sharp object like a drill bit, and pushed it all the way down. At the same time, on the other side of this huge black planet, a huge warship had just decelerated and was slowly descending toward the planet's surface. The appearance of this warship was a little special. It did not look like a battleship, but more like a large engineering ship. Of course, this kind of engineering ship was referring to the exploration and excavation of planets. In this graveyard space zone, there were indeed such exploration and excavation ships. Their goal was to search for the star core origin in the cores of planets. Compared to Yi Xian's actions of activating his magic treasure by himself and exhausting his Zhen Qi to dig down, not only were they more professional, they were also a group of explorers. Even their excavation speed was completely incomparable to that of Yi Xian's. After all, even a specialized exploration and excavation ship had been sent here, and a large one at that. At this moment, in the main control room of the exploration and excavation ship, more than 10 figures were standing in front of a big screen. There were both men and women among them, and their cultivation was different. All of them were in the 9th level of the core state. Chapter 2601. Sky River Planet's bounty. After the decision was made, the exploration and excavation work quickly began. This enormous excavation ship looked huge, but in fact, the ship only carried the 13 people in the main control room. An engineering ship like this was basically automated. Even if there were some maintenance work that required manpower, it was usually done by the ship's robots. Since the myriad Luo Federation science and technology faction could keep pace with the powerful cultivation faction, it was obvious how advanced the Federation's science and technology was. The excavation site chosen by the excavation spaceship was also a deep and wide canyon. After the spaceship slowly landed, for huge mechanical arms extended from the bottom of the spaceship and firmly gripped the bed to stabilize the spaceship after the excavation began. Soon, a retractable door opened in the center of the lower part of the ship, and a huge special alloy drill bit stretched out. After it touched the ground of the canyon, it quickly began to rotate at high speed. For a moment, Sand and stone flew everywhere, and a huge roar sounded. Even in the main control room of the ship, which had excellent sound insulation, the noise could be heard clearly. This roar lasted for about a day. Because the planet being excavated below was relatively large, even with the speed of this large professional excavation ship, it was impossible for the drill bit to reach the central planet's core in a short time. Damn it! It's this annoying noise again. I've been having a migraine lately. Among the 13 figures in the main control room, a young human woman with an extremely hot figure and an enchanting face raised her hand and rubbed her temples. Then, she lazily sat down on the sofa next to her, but her eyes swept over to the bald middle-aged man who was standing in front of the big screen and staring intently at the drill bit that had already drilled into the ground. Then she said, "Boss, if we really have a good harvest today, shouldn't we return to the ship?" After 7 days of listening to the drill bit noise, Lilith really couldn't stand it anymore. I really missed the dreamy resort at the bottom of the Sky River planet. Seeing that the bald man didn't respond, Lilith curled her lips. She raised her right hand and pressed a few buttons on a metal bracelet on her left wrist. Bass! A faint sound came out, and in front of her, a virtual 5-dimensional 3-dimensional screen appeared in an instant. The metal bracelet on her left hand was actually a personal computer. Through the star sector level network system of this large excavation ship, she could connect to the public network of Sky River Star. Of course, you have to have the authority to enter the gateway. And this authority was the official citizenship of the Wan Luo Federation. Lilith obviously missed the dreamy scenery of the holiday area at the bottom of the Sky River planet. At this time, the scene displayed on the 5-dimensional virtual screen in front of her was the scene of the holiday area at the bottom of the sea. The colorful glow of fireflies enveloped Lilith, turning the area around her into a 5-dimensional virtual world. She felt like she was wandering in an undersea resort. Although there was no real sensation, the visual enjoyment was not bad at all. In the boring life of exploration work, this was indeed the best way to relax and release stress. Everyone was obviously used to it. None of the other 12 people in the main control room had the intention of turning their heads to look at them. Heavens, a reward of 10 billion star coins? Where the hell did this guy come from? Isn't this too extravagant? Suddenly, Lilith's exclamation rang out. This time, it finally attracted the attention of the other 12 people in the main control room. Even the bald middle-aged man who had been standing in front of the big screen and watching the drill down turned his head to look in shock. 10 billion star coins was not a small amount. Although the excavation starship was large in size, it would take at least half a year for it to earn 10 billion star coins. After deducting the cost of wear and tear and maintenance, there would only be a few 100 million star coins left after the dividends were distributed to everyone. Of course, the 10 billion star coins here referred to white coins. At this time, Lilith had already exited the virtual scenery of Sky River Star's undersea resort. A wanted poster with pictures and text appeared on the personal terminal in front of her. It was actually issued by the ruling authorities of Sky River Star. 10 billion star coins was just the amount of the reward. As for the reason, it was because of the space pirates. There was a simple portrait on the bounty warrant. It was 60% similar to Yi Xian, but it didn't have a name or any specific identity information. On the other hand, the crime was extremely detailed. Below the words on the bounty warrant, there were even 2 pictures. They were the dust concealment ship and the meteor sword. As for the pot-shaped magical equipment named Demon Purge, it was not listed. Obviously, its level was not low. It was not appropriate for it to appear on the wanted poster, in case someone coveted it. Robbers in the Graveyard Star Zone are not people you and I can afford to offend. Even if we do earn 10 billion star coins, we won't be alive to spend them. Just go to sleep. The bald, middle-aged man glanced at the wanted poster and turned to look at the big screen again. The others were stunned. A touch of disappointment appeared on their faces, but no one said anything. As mentioned before, although the Graveyard Star Zone was in the 3rd universe, which was controlled by the human race, it was in a gray area between the technology camp and the cultivation camp. There were 2 sides to this vast star zone. One was the Sky River Star, which belonged to the technology camp, and the other was the Purple Heaven Star, which belonged to the 10 Ultimates Heavenly Palace, which belonged to the cultivation camp. Bai Xian was the white-robed man, whose full name was Bai Shirley. On this side of the Graveyard Star Zone, he was absolutely a person who could do whatever he wanted, because his grandfather, Bai Zhengjun, was the leader of the Sky River Star. In the technology camp of the Myriad Luo Federation, there were 3 empires and hundreds of small countries. The Sky River Star was one of them. Bai Zhongjun had 1 star, so he could be considered an existence similar to that of a feudal official. Moreover, he had always been very protective of his people. How could someone who dared to rob his grandson on this side of the graveyard star zone be an ordinary person? A day passed in the blink of an eye. The huge drill had already drilled through the passage to the core of the star under their feet. There were only a few hundred meters left. This section had to be accurately drilled through manually, otherwise the core would be damaged. Now that the drill was retracting, the 13 people in the main control room were all excited. Although there were still a few hundred meters to go, they were able to probe the situation in the center of the planet. They found a 1-foot square level 5 red planet core and a half-foot square level 6 blue planet core. These were all high-grade goods that could be worth a lot of money. As usual, Lilith, Ho-san, and Hong-Wu, the 3 of you come with me. The rest of you stay here. After that, the bald middle-aged man turned around and left the main control room. Behind him, the other 3 people immediately followed. Their mission was to wait for the drill to exit, then follow the tunnel to the core of the stellar core and retrieve the stellar core's origin that had been detected. Chapter 2602. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. He slipped away on his own. Yi Xian finally heard the system beep in his head after an entire day's worth of sleepless nights. Ding! Congratulations to the host. You have discovered the star core origin. Do you wish to collect it? This meant that he was now very close to the center of the massive star core. He was so close that the devouring system in his body could directly collect the star core origin. Yi Xian immediately gave the order to collect the star core origin. Then, the system beep sounded in his head again. Ding! Congratulations to the host. You have obtained a high-grade star core origin. The level 5 red star core origin is 1 foot square. The level 6 blue star core origin is half a foot square. Ding! System beep. Do you wish to absorb the star core origin and continue the fusion? Absorb. Continue the fusion. Without the slightest hesitation, Yi Xian immediately gave the order. Although he was originally determined to obtain the star core origin within this star, before this, Yi Xian was still fusing with the 4 treasures. It was only because of the lack of fusion energy that he stopped. Now that he had obtained the energy, he naturally had to continue. Ding! Beginning to absorb the star core origin. Absorption complete. Ding! System beep. Beginning the fusion. Progress 1. Progress 2. As the system beep sounded in his head again, Yi Xian's heart, which had been in his throat, finally settled back down. Then, he subconsciously checked the remaining star core origin. He was pleasantly surprised. It seemed that although the 4 treasures were fusing at the same time, which was equivalent to 2 separate fusions, the fusion energy consumption was not very high. Apart from the ones that had been absorbed by the system previously, the 2 high-grade star core origins that he had just obtained were only half of the level 5 red star core origin, which was half a foot square. As for the level 6 blue star core origin, which was half a foot square, it had not been touched at all. Yi Xian was completely able to accept this level of energy consumption. However, of course, this was only the first time these 4 treasures had been fused. If he were to fuse other treasures into them in the future, it would be equivalent to a second fusion. Those who had played online games knew that the more equipment was fused, the greater the success rate and consumables would be. It was unknown whether the same situation would happen to the fusion system that had just been activated by the devouring system. Yi Xian decided that he would try it as soon as he obtained a suitable treasure in the future. Now that the fusion of the 4 star core origin translation, Yi Xian translation, there was no reason for him to stay. Anyway, there was still plenty of star core origin. And of the star core origin. Especially the level 6 blue star core origin. The level star core origin. The star origin, that blue star origin. The star origin, blue star to star translation origin star translation origin translation underscore translation. Of Yi translation. To Yi level 2 to translation 2 to level. The Yi star was. If it was the same level 5 red star core origin, this half a foot square might not be enough for him to advance from level 3 to level 4 star core origin. However, it was hard to say what would happen to the level 6 blue star core origin. After all, its quality was 1 level higher. Yi Xian leaped up and quickly flew to the planet's surface. He decided to find a secluded place on this planet for seclusion and absorb all the star core origins in his possession. He would try his best to increase his strength before searching for new star core origins. At the same time, just 100 meters away from where Yi Xian had just stood, the 4 powerhouses from the large engineering ship were all dumbfounded. Just a moment ago, they had clearly seen the 2 small piles of star core origins. But just as they were about to collect them, they mysteriously disappeared. To be more precise, they turned into a ray of light and drilled into the rock formation on the opposite side. Bandits! They are definitely bandits. How could the star core origins grow legs and run away on their own? After being stunned for a few seconds, the bald man jumped up and roared. At the same time, he raised his hand and waved it. A sword-shaped magic weapon emitting a green glow flew out of his hand and touched the rock formation as if it was cutting tofu. It quickly pushed forward. The distance of 100 meters was crossed in the blink of an eye. A straight tunnel appeared in front of the 4 powerhouses, making them gasp. What the bald man said just now was just a guess, but now, everything was confirmed. The star core origin that had been reflected in his eyes just now had indeed been forcibly snatched by someone from 100 meters away from the rock formation. This method was simply unbelievable. Could it be the guy who stole by Shirley's star core origin? Lilith's heart skipped a beat, and she immediately said, according to the arrest warrant, this guy also stole one of White Scoundrel's astral devourers. This kind of astral beast always feeds on astral core sources. Maybe it has some kind of talent that allows it to directly devour astral core sources from 100 meters away. Otherwise, wouldn't it collapse a planet every time it eats? That's right. This kind of unbridled method is very similar. Damn it, he actually dared to steal from me, Baldy Sue. Brilliance flashed in the bald man's eyes. He immediately turned on the communication system and gave an order to the people who were guarding the large engineering ship on the surface of the planet. Contact the Heavenly River planet immediately. Tell them that we have found the wretched space pirate who just stole a bunch of our star core origins. Send the coordinates to them directly and ask for the Federation's backup. After that, the bald man's body shook, and he ascended along the tunnel in front of him. Let's go after him. In the boundless sea of stars, not far away from the enormous planet where the large excavation starship was located, an enormous fleet was sailing. The fleet had 10 warships in total, all of which were large planetary warships. Also, the emblem of the Thousand Luo Federation was painted on the hull of the warships, indicating that they were all official warships. Inside the control room of the flagship at the center of the fleet, Bai Shirley, the white-robed man, was staring at the big screen in front of him gloomily. After Yi Xian escaped that day, he had crossed the void with his physical body and met up with the fleet of the Federation that was sent by the Changbai army on the Heavenly River planet to protect him. Then, he contacted the Heavenly River planet and issued the wanted poster. In the meantime, he had chased after Yi Xian all the way. It was a pity that he hadn't received any feedback until now. The graveyard space zone was simply too large. Even though too many experts of the Federation had entered it, it was still like looking for a needle in a haystack to find the bold space pirate in such a short time. At this moment, Bai Shirley couldn't have been more frustrated. He had always been on a rampage in the Heavenly River planet, and he had never suffered such a loss before. He couldn't have felt more frustrated. Right then, a major of the fleet next to him shouted in surprise, "Master Bai, we have news. The guy is on a dead planet not far away. He has just stolen a batch of star core origins from an exploration team. Damn it, he's really got guts. How dare he steal from us?" Chapter 2603. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Star Cannons Bombardment Planet-level warships were the entry-level warships of the Immortal Dynasty military of the Myriad Luo Federation Science and Technology faction. Each of them was 1,000 meters long and was equipped with star cannons. At this moment, 10 planet-level Federation warships surrounded a huge black planet. Not even a fly could escape. On the surface of the planet, Baldy Sue, Lilith, and the other 2 had returned to the large warship. They had chased after Yi Xian along the tunnel on the opposite side, but they did not find him until they reached the surface of the planet. In the end, they had no choice but to return. Of course, there was another reason for this. Baldy Sue was worried that the other party's cultivation was too high. After all, that was the person who dared to attack by ruffian in this star field. Since they had already reported to Sky River Planet, There was no need to fight to the death with the other party. The Federation fleet of Sky River Planet would arrive soon. When that time came, as long as they caught that space pirate, not only would they recover the stolen planet core origin, but they would also be rewarded with 10 billion star coins. Boss, the Federation's fleet of the Sky River Planet has arrived. They have surrounded the entire planet. There are a total of 10 planetary military warships. Judging from the speed of their arrival, the one in charge of this fleet is probably White Scoundrel. He has been searching this starfield all along. Retracting his gaze from the big screen, a member who stayed behind turned to look at Baldy Sue and reported the news of the arrival of the 10 planet-level warships. This time, that kid won't be able to escape. 10 planet-level military warships equipped with star cannons. A ferocious smile appeared on Baldy Sue's face. He waved his hand and said, "Let's not stay here any longer. Take off immediately and meet up with the fleet above. The rest is up to them. We just have to wait for the reward." At the same time in the vast space above the planet. As soon as the 10 warships surrounded the Black Planet, By Shirley, who was in the flagship central control room, immediately gave the order to attack. "Everyone, fire the star cannons and force that kid out." But, a major standing next to him hesitated for a moment before reminding him, "Young Master Bai, that large engineering ship is still inside. It seems to be taking off. It should be coming to join us." They were the ones who reported that kid's whereabouts. In other words, it was fine for them to open fire, but they had to wait for the engineering ship to come up first. They had also contributed. "Bastard, it's just a crappy engineering ship. So what if you blow it up? Is it more important than my face? Is it more important than Xing Chang's face?" By Shirley immediately roared. "Since they are all meritorious subjects, then let's see this through to the end. Can't they sacrifice their lives for the Federation? What if that brat is hiding in the engineering ship and waiting for the ship to come up? If he suddenly rushes out, we won't even be able to catch up." That made sense. All the officers in the central control room were speechless. The order to fire was immediately given. The full name of the star cannon was the Star Destroyer Cannon. It was said to be able to shatter a planet. Of course, the star cannons on the entry-level planetary-level Federation military warships could only shatter a group of relatively large meteors that they encountered during interstellar travel. For such a huge planet below, it was absolutely impossible to shatter it with star cannons. However, if 10 star cannons were to fire at the same time, it was possible to blow the entire planet up. A deafening roar rang out, and the 10 warships that surrounded the Black Star each fired a 10-meter-thick energy beam at the same time, blasting the Black Star below at the same time. At present, the massive engineering ship had just left the surface. The 13 people in the ship's central control room were all aghast at the sudden sight. Then, as Baldy Sue's cursing bellowed, the few people controlling the engineering ship finally came to their senses and hurriedly changed the command, landing the engineering ship on the planet's surface once more. Although staying here like this was still an abyss of suffering, at least it was better than flying up and being blown to pieces by the enemy star cannons, right? This kind of engineering ship could not be equipped with an energy shield. They did not have the financial resources to do so. Abandoned ship. Abandoned ship. That bastard By Shirley is really a hooligan. He's really a jerk. After the engineering ship landed again, Baldy Sue, as the captain, immediately gave the order to abandon the ship. Staying on the ship would make them live targets. Since By Shirley had already fired the cannons, there was obviously no way he would let them leave. This was to silence them. Instead of staying on the ship, it was better to find a place to hide on this planet. Perhaps they would still have a chance of survival. The group of 13 people packed up their important belongings and then hurriedly left the engineering ship, disappearing into the depths of a large canyon on the planet's surface. At this moment, Yi Xian was in seclusion in a cave on the other side of the planet. The bloodline of the astral devourer was indeed not simple. Coupled with the ability of the devouring system, the speed at which he absorbed the astral core origins was simply astonishing. In such a short time, in less than half a day, the remaining 2 small piles of level 5 red astral core origins and level 6 blue astral core origins had all been completely absorbed by Yi Xian. Just as he ended his seclusion and opened his eyes, the system notification finally sounded in his mind. Ding! Congratulations to the host. You have leveled up. Current level. Level 4 astral core state. Sure enough, Even with the same amount of level 5 red astral core origins and a small pile of level 6 blue astral core origins, Yixian had only leveled up by a small amount this time. It would only get more and more difficult in the future. He was a little depressed at the thought of this. Fortunately, he now had the bloodline talent of the Astral Devourer, so he did not have to worry too much about the source of the astral core origins. Rumble! Boom! The entire planet suddenly shook violently, and at the same time, there was a large number of loud rumbles, which made Yixian, who had just gotten up and was about to leave, tremble. An extremely bad feeling welled up in his heart. Extending his consciousness, he quickly discovered the 10 Federation warships that surrounded the planet. Without any hesitation, Yixian immediately came to a realization. Without a doubt, the white-robed man had caught up, and this time, he had brought an entire fleet with him. For some reason, he was certain that he was on this planet, and the cannons on the ship were firing at the same time. This was the rhythm of forcing him out. What went wrong? Could it be that there was a tracking imprint in the treasures that were previously collected? Frowning, Yixian began to think, but he quickly dismissed this possibility. All the treasures were collected through the devouring system. If there really was such a tracking imprint, it was impossible for the system not to detect it. Whatever, the enemy's warship cannons are firing non-stop. If I don't rush out, I'll die in the end. Chapter 2604. Opportunity for the second fusion ding. Congratulations to the host for successful fusion. You have obtained the hidden star shuttle. Ding! Congratulations to the host for successful fusion. You have obtained the Tian Yun sword. As Yixian took the initiative to check on the integration of the system, the notification of the devouring system rang in his mind. Without a doubt, both fusions were successful. His flying star shuttle had merged with the concealment ship to form a new concealment star shuttle. Since it was still a shuttle, it meant that the speed of the previous flying star shuttle had been inherited. At the same time, the word concealment in the name of this new warship meant that the perfect concealment formation on the white-robed man's concealment ship had also been transplanted. These were the advantages and specialties of the two warships in the first place. Since it was a fusion, it was naturally a combination of the strong and the strong. It was impossible to keep something that was of little value. Similarly, Yixian's heavenly star sword and the door-like red broadsword, the heavenly meteor sword, had also merged into the current heavenly meteor sword. However, Yixian was not in a hurry to check this sword. His attention was immediately attracted by the newly merged hidden starship. The concealment starship was still a small battleship. It basically retained the streamlined shape of the previous flying star shuttle, but its surface was slightly modified and became more complex. Of course, the concealment array was also engraved on it. However, this kind of engraving array would only appear when it was activated and deactivated. Under normal circumstances, it would not be visible. The biggest difference was the internal structure and decoration. The previous flying star shuttles were mainly practical, but the concealment starship was a luxury item. Now, all the luxurious decorations were inherited from the concealment starship. However, this was not what Yixian cared about. What he cared about the most was the speed of this concealed star shuttle. Right now, the entire Black Star was surrounded by 10 planet-level battleships. If he wanted to escape, it was possible for him to rely on the perfect concealment formation of the star concealment shuttle. However, Yixian didn't dare to take the risk. If he was discovered, he could only escape. In that case, the speed of the star concealment shuttle was very important. In fact, speed alone wasn't enough, because no matter how fast you were, you wouldn't be able to outrun the star cannon beam of the Planetary State Federation's battleship. It would be great if there was a higher-level energy shield system, but that was just wishful thinking. Neither Yixian's flying star shuttle nor the white-robed man's concealment warship had such an energy shield. No matter how powerful the fusion system was, it was impossible for it to appear out of thin air. The planetary-class Federation battleships were the entry-level standard battleships used by the 3 large empires and hundreds of small countries under the Immortal Dynasty. Information about their performance and firepower could be found on the official website of the Federation military, so it was not a secret. Therefore, Yixian quickly found out the speed of their interstellar travel through the devouring system. Comparing it with the hidden starship that had just been successfully integrated, he suddenly felt depressed. Although the difference in speed was not that great, it was still a difference. Since that was the case, once the concealment array was useless, then Yixian would undoubtedly be in great danger. Without an energy shield and unable to match the speed of his opponent, there was no way he could survive. At this moment, Yi Xian's extended divine sense unexpectedly captured a small battleship. It was actually the kind of advanced battleship that had an energy shield. Moreover, this small advanced battleship was not high up in the sky, but on the surface of this black planet, not too far away from Yi Xian's hiding place. It seemed to be in a hurry and in a sorry state as it steered towards a dry trench. A second fusion? Yi Xian's eyes lit up immediately. This battleship was obviously faster than the flying star shuttle. This was normal. After all, it was an advanced battleship with an energy shield, so its speed was naturally not much slower. If he could snatch this battleship, if he carried out another fusion, then the current hidden starship would be upgraded for the second time. Not only would it have an energy shield, but its speed would also be greatly increased. The Flying Star Shuttle was just a simple battleship that was equivalent to a means of transportation. The only thing it pursued was speed. Even the white-robed man's hidden starship did not have an attack system. Since this advanced battleship even had an energy shield, it most likely did not lack an attack system. If it did, it would undoubtedly be a pleasant surprise for Yi Xian. Soon, even the abandoned large excavation ship on the other side of the planet fell into the detection of Yi Xian's divine sense. His face immediately darkened. Obviously, it was the people on this large excavation ship that exposed his whereabouts. The small advanced battleship just now had flown in the direction of the large excavation ship, so it was most likely them. In fact, this was indeed the case. This small advanced battleship belonged to Baldy Su. As a veteran and professional treasure hunter, Baldy Su had wandered the graveyard domain for many years. The star coins he had accumulated were enough for him to buy a small advanced battleship with an attack system and an energy shield. At present, the 13 crew members, including Lilith, were all on his God of Fortune. Since this battleship had an energy shield, their chances of survival were very high. However, no one knew when the 10 Federation battleships would leave. In order to save energy on the energy shield, they had to find a safe place to hide first. Yi Xian immediately activated the hidden starship and concealed all of its presence. As if it was invisible, it quickly chased after the battleship. The battleship was not very fast, so the hidden starship caught up with it without much effort. Then, it followed behind from a distance. The devouring hand could forcibly seize this battleship, but it would have to wait until everyone in the battleship came out. Otherwise, the success rate of the capture would be too low. It could be said that it was close to none. It was obviously impossible for the other party to hide in the battleship all the time. That would consume too much energy. At this time, the most important thing was to conserve energy. No one knew if they would have to fight a protracted battle on this planet. The white-robed man would never give up so easily. Since the other party could leak his whereabouts, they must know about the grudge between him and the white-robed man. Therefore, they should know more about this than Yi Xian. What Yi Xian needed to do was to immediately take action and forcibly seize the battleship when the other party found a suitable hiding place and all of them came out of the battleship. This opportunity came quickly. The battleship in front of him stopped at the deepest part of the dry trench. Then, Yi Xian saw figures coming out of the battleship one after another. The last to come out was a bald, brawny man. After him, no one else came out. Yi Xian's heart skipped a beat and he immediately activated the devouring hand's capture skill. In the next moment, just as the bald man raised his hand and was about to put away the battleship suddenly disappeared. Yi Xian did not show up at all, and the hidden starship was not exposed either. After the battleship was in his hands, he quickly fled. My God of Fortune? Why did it suddenly disappear? Chapter 2605. Translator, Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations Hidden God all-round battleship. Without waiting for him to return to his previous closed-door cultivation location, Yi Xian immediately checked the God of Fortune that he'd just snatched. The surprise came so quickly that Yi Xian's blood was boiling. Although the name of this battleship was very old-fashioned, its level was definitely not for show. It had both attack and defense. Not only did it have an energy shield, it even had an attack system. There was a star cannon at the front and back of the battleship, which was the standard battleship cannon equipped on the Federation's planet-level battleships. It could directly destroy a small meteor. It seemed that the bald man had spent a lot of star coins to build this small advanced battleship. Miners were indeed rich people. This could be seen from the large pile of star core sources in one of the cabins of the God of Fortune. The only pity was that these star core sources were all level 1 white or level 2 orange, with only a small amount of level 4 green and level 5 red. As for level 6 blue, there was not a single piece. However, the advantage was that there was a large amount. According to Yi Xian's estimation, it should be enough to fuse this battleship with his hidden starship a second time. Right now, his hidden starship was already very good in terms of sailing speed, and it also had a rare concealment array. If it could successfully fuse with the God of Fortune a second time, then the new battleship would not only be able to hide, but its speed would also be higher. What was even rarer was that it also had high-quality attack systems such as an energy shield and star cannon. This was simply a perfect all-round battleship. Just thinking about it made Yi Xian impatient. Very quickly, Yi Xian returned to his previous closed-door cultivation location, while the star cannons of the 10 battleships outside continued to rumble and explode. Fortunately, this black star was too large, so it wouldn't be completely shattered in a short period of time. However, Yi Xian did not have much time. He had to complete the second fusion as soon as possible. Ding! Discovered hidden starship. Discovered God of Fortune. Do you want to fuse? Ding! Discovered star core sources. Do you want to absorb energy? Following the notification from the devouring system, Yi Xian did not hesitate and immediately chose to fuse with it. The system did not continue to ask for instructions on how to absorb the energy from the fusion, and directly took it from the God of Fortune's cabin. Although the grade of this pile of star core sources was not high, there was a lot of them. According to Yi Xian's estimation, if he collected all of them, he would most likely be able to advance from his current 4th grade star core level to 5th grade star core level. But that was useless. It couldn't solve the crisis in front of them. Ding! Fusion energy absorption complete. Beginning fusion. Progress 1. Progress 2. As the system beeped again, Yi Xian checked the star core origin that had been thrown out of the God of Fortune's cabin by the fusion system. The result made him smile bitterly. Although the small mountain of star core origin had not been completely used up, more than 90% of it had been used up. The star core origin that had been absorbed had been reduced to pure star core crystals. Apart from recycling them to the Federation's Affairs Department in exchange for star coins, there was basically no other use for them. The fusion progress was very slow. Yi Xian had nothing to do, so he also absorbed the remaining star core origin. Unfortunately, the result was not suspenseful at all. He was still a 4th grade star core level. The further he advanced, the more star core origin energy he would need to advance by a small level. Time passed slowly. The 10 large planetary-grade battleships in the sky had been pouring down their cannons. The entire huge black planet was shrouded in the noisy smoke and dust. One volley of cannons was enough to crush 10 star core origin energy beams. What about hundreds of volleys of cannons? The surface of the entire planet had become full of craters. This kind of continuous powerful bombardment caused the entire planet to constantly quake. Under the violent shaking, some abysses and trenches collapsed one after another. Even some huge mountains collapsed. Yi Xian's hiding place was deep within the planet, close to the core region. Now it was affected quite a bit. This made him very worried. This huge black planet would not be able to hold on for much longer. After a full 4 hours, the fusion was finally over. Ding! Congratulations to the host. Fusion successful. You have obtained the all-round advanced grade battleship Soul Concealment Shuttle. At this moment, when the system beeped again, Yi Xian felt his whole body relax. It was as if he had heard the sound of nature. His 108,000 pores were blowing out cold air, and he felt like he was floating. All round. And it was an advanced grade battleship. Even the name of the Soul Concealment Shuttle was very pleasing to the ear. All of this could be said to be perfect. Of course, the Soul Concealment Shuttle was still a small battleship. Its exterior still retained the streamlined shape of the Flying Star-grade battleship, but the surface of the ship had some additional equipment. These were probably accessories for the star cannons and energy shield system. As for the interior, there were some changes compared to before. There was more space. Now, even if 20 people entered the inner cabin at the same time, it could still fit inside. Yi Xian immediately checked the various attributes of the Soul Concealment Shuttle. In terms of speed, it had indeed increased by a large margin. Compared to the standard planetary-grade battleships of the Federation military, it was already slightly faster. All of this made Yi Xian very satisfied. The only thing that made him a little dumbfounded was the 2 star cannons and the energy shield system on the ship. If they needed to be activated, they would need energy, and this energy was also from the star core origin. At this point, Yi Xian finally understood why the bald man had piled so much low-grade star core origin in the God of Fortune cabin. After all this time, it was not even a safe. The star core origin was provided for the God of Fortune to activate the energy shield and to fire the star cannons. But now the last bit of star core origin had been used up by Yi Xian out of boredom while waiting for the results of the fusion. And this huge black star had just been excavated. No matter what, there could not be any star core origin left in the center of the star core. Yi Xian was dumbfounded. It was fine that the star cannons could not be used, but the energy shield was a life-saving thing. It had to be prepared with energy that could be activated temporarily. After all, although the Soul Concealment Shuttle was slightly faster than the 10 planetary-grade Federation battleships, how could it be faster than the energy beam of the star cannons? If the enemy fired a shot, without the energy shield, it would definitely be over. In his depression, Yi Xian suddenly thought of the bald man he had stolen from the God of Fortune. As a professional miner, and the low-grade star core origin that was thrown into the God of Fortune as a reserve energy source can be piled up into a small mountain. Then, how could he not have a level 5 red star core origin or higher? Yi Xian muttered to himself. His eyes immediately lit up. Although he also felt that it was a little too much to always rob the same person. Who asked this guy to leak his whereabouts? The trouble in front of him was all caused by him. It seemed that for the sake of the God of Fortune and the high-quality star core origin that was about to be obtained, he could just not be calculative and let him live. Chapter 2606. Translator, Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations. If you want to live, you have to pay. High up in the sky, in the central control room of the 10 Planetary Federation military battleships, the white-robed man by Shirley was staring at the big screen in front of him with a gloomy expression. What was displayed on the screen was the situation of the black star below. The surface of the entire star was now covered in dust, but the star cannons of the 10 battleships were still firing at the same time. It was estimated that the ground below had been completely plowed, but the distance from completely blasting the entire star into cosmic dust was still far away. More importantly, even if they could do that, the energy consumption of the 10 battleships would not be able to keep up. The energy beams of the star cannons did not shoot out of thin air. Every shot represented a large amount of the planet's core source energy. Although Bai Shirley's grandfather, Bai Jianghu, was the governor of the Heavenly River Star, there was another big shot on the Heavenly River Star. That was the commander-in-chief of the Tianchen Empire's military station there, a major general named Zhao Long. The Wan Luo Federation was huge. The Immortal Dynasty of the Science and Technology faction, and the Tenju Celestial Palace of the Cultivation faction each occupied half of the territory of Universe 3. There were 3 large empires and hundreds of small countries under the Immortal Dynasty. Tianchen Nation was a small country under one of the empires. The Heavenly River Star, on the other hand, was just an administrative planet in the star field controlled by the Heavenly Dust Nation. The reason why Bai Jianghu could become the leader of a planet on planet Tianhe was because he had a good son, Bai Shirley's father. This person held a position on the capital planet of Tianchen Nation. Even so, Bai Jianghu was not the only one who had the final say on planet Tianhe. The Federation system had always been separated between the military and government. Bai Jianghu was the administrative leader, while Zhao Long was the military's leader on planet Tianhe. Zhao Long's family was also on the capital planet of Tianchen Nation. He had a strong background and did not seem to get along with Bai Shirley's father. Hence, Bai Jianghu and Zhao Long only seemed to be harmonious on the surface. However, although the military power was in Zhao Long's hands, as the leader of a planet, Bai Jianghu had the right to deploy some battleships as guards. The total amount of battleships he could deploy was 50 planetary states and 3 star states. The 10 ships that Bai Shirley brought out were part of the 50 planetary ships allocated to Bai Jianghu by the Sky River planet's military. Even though these warships were for Bai Jianghu to use, they were still part of the military. If they used up too much energy, even Bai Jianghu would not be able to explain himself, let alone Bai Shirley. Zhao Long would most likely take the opportunity to make things difficult for him. Therefore, even if these 10 battleships had the ability to completely destroy the enormous planet below, Bai Shirley did not dare to expend so much energy. Furthermore, it was very difficult to do so with 10 star cannons firing at the same time. That brat definitely won't dare to show his face. He should be hiding in the depths of the planet. Maybe he has already been crushed into meat paste by the collapsed rocks. Gritting his teeth, Bai Shirley continued in a deep voice. Give the order. Once the star cannons are done firing, dispatch 10 small landing ships. This young master will personally go down and find that brat's body. I hope that the starry sky devouring beast is fine. The row of officers standing behind had been anxious for a long time. When they heard that they no longer needed to expend energy, they looked at each other and secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Although they felt that it was a little too risky to let Bai Shirley personally go down to search, in order to prevent this guy from staying in the central control room, if the order was given again, they would not be able to explain themselves when they returned. As such, they hesitated for a moment before finally nodding. 10 small landing ships quickly flew out from the central flagship's rear cabin and headed towards the planet below. Bai Shirley was in the cabin of one of the spaceships. These small landing ships were about the same size as Yi Xian's spirit concealment shuttle. They were both a dozen meters wide and a few dozen meters long. However, although they had attack systems, they did not have energy shields. As for the concealment array engraved on the ship's body, that was even more out of the question. Moreover, their attack systems were not very powerful. At least, they did not have the 2 star cannons installed on the spirit concealment shuttle. Therefore, no matter how one compared them, these 10 small landing ships were far inferior to Yi Xian's spirit concealment shuttle. If Bai Shirley had known that Yi Xian actually had such a perfect all-around warship, he definitely would not have dared to leave the central flagship so easily. Unfortunately, there were no ifs in this world. This also meant that Bai Shirley was destined to never return from this trip. On the planet's surface, in the deepest part of the thick and dry trench, Baldy Su, Lilith, Hong Wu, and the rest of the 13 were currently holed up in a natural rock cave deep in the trench with bitter expressions. The inexplicable disappearance of the God of Fortune cast the entire team into a dark cloud. Although the other 12 people, such as Lilith and Hong Wu, each had a small warship, they were far inferior to Baldy Su's God of Fortune. Not to mention the weapon systems, their private warships did not even have energy shields. In the face of this kind of bombardment from the star cannons, they would die if they ventured out. At this moment, as the bombardment of the star cannons stopped, the entire enormous planet became quiet. Lilith raised her head and glanced in the direction of the entrance of the cave. She said suspiciously, "The commotion outside seems to have stopped. Did that white scoundrel leave?" "That's impossible. It's not like you don't know how precious the universe devourer is. Not to mention the matter of face, white scoundrel would never give up so easily just to take back this beast." The bald man shook his head slowly, with bad luck all over his face. "If my guess is correct, they must have sent a small landing ship to search for him. After such a long bombardment, the surface of the entire planet must have been plowed. Nobody can guarantee that the wretched space pirate is not dead yet." "I don't think so. Boss, the strange disappearance of your God of Fortune is most likely the work of that space pirate. That guy is too evil." On the side, Hong Wu took over the conversation. At the same time, a perplexed look appeared on his face. However, it's one thing to lose the Star Core origins, but now even the God of Fortune has mysteriously disappeared. Could that universe devourer be able to directly devour a warship? I've never heard of it. Now is not the time to think about these things. Baldy Su waved his hand and sighed again. The landing ship sent by White Scoundrel will find us very soon. By then he will most likely kill us. Therefore, even if this cave does not collapse, we can't stay any longer. Now that the bombardment has temporarily stopped, it should have been the best opportunity to escape, but the God of Fortune has been lost. Not to mention the energy shield, none of your private warships are fast enough to catch my eyes. There is no way you can escape the pursuit of the 10 planetary warships. It seems that we are really doomed this time. In fact, you do have one last chance. Chapter 2607. Ancient Cultivator's Cave. Who is it? Who's there? Get out here. As Yi Xian's voice abruptly rang out, the 13 people in the cave immediately became alert. At the same time as they shouted, their divine senses immediately swept out. A few of them even directly activated their artifacts, ready to attack. Unfortunately, under the sweep of their divine senses, there was nothing at the entrance and outside of the cave. There was not even a trace of abnormal spatial fluctuations, causing the people in the cave to suspect that they had just been hallucinating. However, at this moment, Yi Xian's voice rang out again. If you dawdle any longer, I'm going to leave. However, that bai you mentioned seems to be coming this way. Since he's a hoodlum, even if you inform him, the possibility of him silencing you is still very high. It's you? You're that space pirate? Baldy Sue finally reacted, and his expression became extremely ugly. Hand over my god of fortune. It's fine that you stole our planet core source, but you must return the god of fortune. Otherwise, this matter will not be over. What is the god of fortune? A warship? Do you think that I would need your god of fortune when I have a warship that even has a concealment array engraved on it? Yi Xian's cold laughter rang out. As for the planet core source, I was indeed the one who took it. However, it was originally an object without an owner. You can explore and excavate it, so why can't I? In the end, it fell into my hands, which only shows that your skills are inferior and you were slower than me. Is there a problem with that? His words rendered the 13 people in the cave speechless. Yi Xian's words were indeed reasonable regarding the matter of the planet core source. They had no words to refute him. As for the god of fortune, this warship even had such a perfect concealment array engraved on it, so its level was obvious. Was there a need to be greedy for the god of fortune? It should be known that although the human race in the myriad Luo Federation was divided into the cultivation camp and the technological camp, and the two camps cooperated very closely with each other, even in the cultivation camp, this kind of array master was in existence with a transcendent status. It was definitely expensive to ask them to engrave an array on a warship. Even if you had money, you wouldn't be able to hire anyone. Under such circumstances, when there was an opportunity, most people would engrave speed or attack-type formations. Even if it was a defensive formation, it was still better than a concealment formation. The other party's warship even had a concealment array, so how could the rest be lacking? Besides, since he had admitted to the Star Core origin, there was no reason not to admit to the god of fortune. Thinking like this, even Baldy Sue didn't dare to be sure. After all, his god of fortune had disappeared in a very strange manner. There was no trace of it at all. Originally, I saw Bai Rua coming down to search for me, so I took the opportunity to leave. I passed by and overheard your conversation, so I wanted to do a small business deal. Just as Baldy Sue and the others were hesitating, Yi Xian's voice sounded again. This time, it sounded like he was really going to leave. But it seems like you guys aren't interested. Fine, I'll take my leave first. I don't want to waste too much time. If I get caught by that white scoundrel, I'll be in trouble. Step on it. Baldy Sue was really anxious this time. He gritted his teeth and steeled his heart. Okay, it's a deal. We'll pay a little. When you're outside the encirclement, deliberately reveal yourself and help us lure the white scoundrel away from the warship outside. With the level of your warship, I'm sure its speed won't be slow. Doing this won't put you in any danger. We'll go all out and gamble on your character. That's right. Actually, I'm a businessman. Otherwise, I wouldn't be thinking about doing a small business deal at a time like this. Businessmen value their promises. This is credibility. Don't worry, I won't cheat you. Hearing this, the 13 people in the cave almost simultaneously twitched their mouths. They had only heard of businessmen valuing profits. What the hell was a businessman valuing promises? Credibility? Right now, they didn't even know who you were or what you looked like. What did that have to do with credibility? Even so, they had no choice but to take a gamble. Of course, the most important thing was that Baldy Sue believed in the power of Yi Xian's warship. Since he wouldn't be in any danger, he would lend a hand. As long as his character wasn't too bad, he would still do it. At that moment the other 12 people, including Baldy Sue, each took out a small pile of Star Core origins, and none of them were low-level goods. A small portion of them were level 5 red, while the majority were level 4 green. Only Lilith, who was at the side, frowned and did not move. Are you guys trying to dismiss a beggar? Could it be that my life is only worth this much? At least 10 times. Also, there seems to be someone who hasn't paid, right? That's making things difficult for me. 10 times? You might as well rob. No, he's robbing from the start. This is clearly a blatant robbery. He's a space pirate to begin with, okay? It'd be strange if he didn't rob. Everyone, just admit it. Our lives are more important. These guys had followed Baldy Sue in the mining of star cores for many years. In fact, Every one of them was quite wealthy. The situation was urgent at the moment, and they could tell from the probing just now that Yi Xian wasn't that easy to deal with. Therefore, after complaining for a while, they still took out some star core origins one after another. Although the quantity was about the same as before, the quality was one level higher. Most of them were level 5 red, and there was even a small portion of them that were level 6 blue. Including the star core origins that they had taken out earlier, the total amount had already exceeded what Yi Xian had obtained from the center of this black planet. It was quite a haul. However, this time, the ones who took out the star core origins were still the 12 people, including Baldy Sue. Only Lilith still didn't move. Even if we're going to the undersea dreamy resort on the Sky River planet, 2 adult tickets are enough to bring a child along for free. We've already bought 12 tickets. Handsome, why don't you just waive my ticket? A pleading expression appeared on Lilith's face. I've lost everything I've gained this time. I can't even take out a single star core origin. If you really want it, then you have to take me with you. I know of an ancient cultivator's immortals cave on a certain planet. I found it when I explored it last time, but I didn't tell anyone. How about we split the loot in half? That's the cave abode of a cultivator from the cultivation camp. The treasures inside are definitely enough to buy my life. In fact, the last part of her speech was the most important part. Baldy Sue and the others' eyelids twitched when they heard this, fearing that Yi Xian would refuse on the spot. However, after Lilith finished speaking, the outside of the cave fell silent. After a while, Yi Xian's voice sounded again. The cave abode of a powerhouse from the cultivation camp? This is quite a good fortune, but you better not lie to me. Otherwise, I promise you'll regret it. No way, no way.